This week, our guest is Rob Smyth. Rob is a freelance sports writer, well known for providing minute-by-minute coverage of football and cricket for The Guardian, and he's also the author of numerous books, including Kaiser, the greatest footballer never to play football, and co-author of Jumpers for Goalposts, How Football Sold Its Soul, Danish Dynamite, the story of football's greatest cult team, and Gaza misses the final. Thanks for coming on, Rob.
Thanks for having me on. It's good to be here.
Yep, thank you very much for joining us. I'm going to hand over to Tom.
So what we're looking at today is an issue of Shoot from the 20th of June 1992, and it's slap by in the middle of UEFA 92, and that is absolutely all over the issue. So on the front cover, we've got Basil Boli and Gary Lineker in the France v England game from that tournament, and the big headline is "Give us a goal, Gary, England draw blank again." Direct from Sweden, UEFA 92. Platt, McCoist, Palmer, Goff, Walker. Colour action inside, England v France, Scotland v Holland, England v Denmark. And there's a picture of I think it's Frank Rijkaard and Stuart McCall, Scotland's uphill battle. And we always look at the price. So it's 55 pence. Australia, it's $2.25. Germany, it's 4 Deutschmarks. And up in the corner, Shoot is first with the Euro action. So anything leap out to you from that front page?
Well, actually, the first thing was something Sanjeev Cody mentioned on when he was on about the whole kind of newsagent thing. You see the name top left, I think it's Gillen. So you know it was one where someone had obviously the equivalent of subscribing in those days had to go to the newsagent to get it. Yeah, that was the big thing. The other thing, which is probably a bit kind of boring and journalisty, but I was thinking what a nightmare it is for a weekly mag during a competition like the Euros. So the date on this is the 20th of June, which I think is a Saturday, but from memory you could get it Wednesday, Thursday.
Yeah.
But of course by the time it comes out, spoiler, England are out because they played the last game. And I noticed also they don't mention Scotland's second game against Germany, which I think was played on a Monday. So just that whole thing, you probably wouldn't care at the time if you absorb all of it, but it must have been such a nightmare for them to publishing deadlines and everything. That, and then just being reminded of watching England flail around trying to score a goal against first Denmark, then France, and then in the last game against Sweden.
Yeah, as we'll find out inside, they're pretty scathing of both Scotland and England.
That really surprised me, actually, how, we'll come to it, but just how critical they were of both teams, but especially of Scotland, given the kind of challenge they had and how well they played against the Netherlands. But I guess we'll come to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because again, we were handed in another kind of group of death.
Yeah.
It's another tough group for Scotland, as was typical in those days. So anything else, Andy, there to say about that cover?
Well, it sort of sets us up for what's to come with the pictures, because it's a very, very photo-heavy edition, this magazine. You know, there's a lot of photographs from this competition throughout the magazine, and it sort of is fixing us up for that. So that's the other thing.
Do you think that's related to the whole printing deadline problem? You know, photos are neutral, and they're not. There's no point writing a piece about, for example, what England need to do against Sweden. So maybe photos are kind of a photo of Carlton Palmer's timeless.
Well, maybe it goes back to what you said about the fact that they would have had tight deadlines to get the pieces in for this, so maybe they just couldn't go into the sort of depth that they needed to, and to fill it out a bit. The photographs were there, as Tom will touch on. They're quite proud, and as the front page says, first with the Euro action, they're quite proud of actually being over there, and they make a wee bit of a fuss about that as well.
So we turn on the pages then. So yep. Pages 2 and 3. So it's straight into it. This is coverage of England. Again, Shoot first with the big match action.
I'm all over the place.
And it's goals or goodbye. England must sink Swedes to reach semis. And a couple of really good pictures there, actually. A picture from behind the England goal of Stuart Pearce's 30-yard free kick, which I think it was cannoned off the bar and went down sort of near the goal line, which was with the best goal chance. A picture of Stuart Pearce with his hands in his head, and there's a goal line clearance there, a sort of despairing dive by Chris Woods. only for Andy Sinton to save his bacon there by clearing off the line. And so there's a wee group table, how they stand after 2 games. Sweden were top with 3 points, France and England 2 points, and Denmark with 1. So England at that point had 2 0-0 draws against France and Denmark. England must beat Sweden to be certain of qualifying for the semi-finals. I remember watching that England-France game. I remember it being a kind of real sort of tousy match. I remember it being quite a sort of exciting game, despite the fact it was a 0-0 draw.
Well, the most exciting thing was Basil Bolly sticking the head on Stuart Pearce, which was just before. I might be misremembering, but I'm pretty sure Pearce goes off to get treatment and comes on, and pretty much his first touch is to belt that against the crossbar. You can imagine what was going through his head at the time. But yeah, do you know, the thing that stood out for me is what I didn't remember this at all, that disgruntled England fans taunted Taylor's team with jeers of what a load of rubbish. That's a bit harsh. I mean, France, before this tournament, had got unbeaten for about 20-odd games. England then beat them in the March in a friendly. But you think for 2 games, all right, 2-0 draws. But it just seems a bit... You're in an 18 tournament, so this is already effectively the quarters. So I was surprised that is kind of associated that level of kind of entitled hostility with social media rage. And obviously it's worse now, but that really stood out. The France game, I think it was a classic example of kind of kick the can down the road. Both teams had drawn the first game. France probably had the theoretically tougher games. They'd drawn with Sweden, the hosts. England had Denmark, who everyone thought were the kind of make weights and had arrived late. So I think it was kind of don't lose rather than push to win and then put it all in the last match, which is kind of a natural instinct of the tournament, I guess, but it kind of backfired for both of them. Yeah, I don't remember much. I remember a Sinton off the line thing. I remember that. I think that was from Onglomar. I think Alan Shearer, who'd only played a handful of games, if that, played and had a header just wide. But the abiding memory is definitely Bob Basil Bolly putting the head on Pearce. Yeah.
I seem to recall after that game, like one of the commentators sort of saying to Stuart Pearce, because nothing happened to Bolly. I don't think he got booked or anything.
No, he didn't. It was completely missed.
I seem to recall a commentator sort of saying, look, we're going to complain about that, Stuart. And he was like, no, I don't. I seem to recall that. He was like,
That rings a bell, actually. Yeah, it's classic kind of old school masculinity, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes.
But it would have been. I mean, I've never been massively patriotic. I probably was around this time more so than over time. But had he scored, that would have been one of the great England goals. Had he come straight off having been headbutted, and it was absolutely blistering free kick as well. And I think you're right. It bounces down, nowhere near over the line, but it bounces kind of close to the line. Yeah. It would have been fantastic. But yeah, I mean, the France team were really fancy going into the tournament. I think they beat Spain in qualification. They had obviously Papin, who was absolutely electric, plus a lot of really good emerging players like Deschamps, Blanc, who was established, and they kind of just didn't do a lot at all. Papin scored 2 really good goals, obviously not against England, but they were. If England were disappointing, then France were even more so. Probably the big letdown of the tournament, I'd say.
Andy, have you got any recollections of that game or that?
What first thing I want to point out is just these are the wee things I like to see. So that goal line clearance with Andy Sinton, what I love from that is the background and it sort of ages there. It's Intel 486, and you know there's people born in a good age these days that won't have a clue what that is. I mean that was the leading computer processor at the time. Which I think a 386 was the first one that I got. You remember General Dealers up at no, this is for Tom. This is in Glasgow. There was a shop called General Dealers just up near the Barras, and I bought a 386, a second-hand 386 from there, and I messed it up and had to take it back in and install it. Yeah, so it's sort of just that ages it for me, that Intel 486. But I'll be honest, the whole competition, I don't really have I don't have clear memories of a lot of it. I think what would I have been doing in '92? So I think I would have been working at the time or at university and didn't really pay much attention to it. So probably the Scotland games, the England games to a degree, but as I say, no abiding memories that I can say this was a tournament that really stuck out for me, other than obviously who went on to win it.
It was the last 8-team tournament as well, so it was pretty kind of quick in and out in maybe 2.5 weeks. Obviously, it's grown since then. But yeah, I know what you mean. I think everyone remembers it fondly because of the Denmark story, which was incredible. But actually, beyond that, it wasn't a great tournament. There was a really good game between Netherlands and Germany, which obviously you will know about because Scotland eventually saved Germany. But yeah, it wasn't a classic by any means. And I suppose also you think of it as, we'll come to this about the back pass change coming in. This is the last tournament before that. So I know kind of often people think Italia 90 rightly is the one that kind of caused all the change, but this is the last tournament before the change was actually implemented. And it was fairly defensive. It's funny, England, I'm torn on Graham Taylor a lot because he did make mistakes. He had so much bad luck with injuries. But then I keep coming back to the fact he left out people like Beardsley and Waddle. But I actually had a look at an 11 who weren't at the Euro. So this is either through selection or injury. So Dave Seaman in goal, Dixon, Pallister, Adams, Dorigo, who was left back for the Champions Leagues. A midfield, admittedly a slightly fancy midfield of Waddle, Gascoigne, Ince, John Barnes, and then Beardsley and Ian Wright, who won the Golden Boot. So, I mean, that's a hell of a team. I know some of them were, he would have picked Gascoigne, he would have picked Barnes, he probably would have picked Dixon. But the rest of them he chose to leave out. I'm always a bit conflicted because he was unlucky, more so in the World Cup qualification campaign that followed. But geez, you look at some of the players in hindsight, think how did they end up in the squad ahead of someone like Tony Adams or Gary Pallister or Ian Wright or whatever? And yeah, England weren't great to watch really.
Well, who is it that's in this magazine that says that about how Palmer and I can't remember if it was Sinton or something. Taylor took them because they fitted into his plans for the team rather than being.
Yeah. Although the interesting thing is, I think those plans were involved. I mean, I do like a lot about Taylor, and he was, by all accounts, an incredibly good man. But his plans were almost evolving too. He was quite open-minded, but he was almost too open-minded. So in this tournament, he plays 4-4-2 in one game. Then he plays a sweeper. Then he goes back to, I think it's 4-4-2. He has 3 different right backs. Keith Curl, Andy Sinton, who's a left winger, essentially played at right wing back. David Batty, a central midfielder. All the while, you've got people like Paul Parker, who played at Man United, sitting at home. He did make some really eccentric choices. I mean, I almost think the Waddle Beardsley stuff, while it looks stupid, I sort of get it, but it's more the choices around that, not picking emerging players like Paul Ince or Ian Wright. I don't know. I just think he almost had too many ideas. A lot of times, remember he famously left Gascoigne out in a game in Ireland and played Gordon Cowans. And again, I sort of get the logic. He'd heard that the Ireland players were going to basically provoke Gascoigne into getting sent off. But when you kind of put all these decisions together, it kind of doesn't look great, really.
Yeah.
And when said that, of course, they were within, a missed chance of reaching the last 4 of the Euros. So it shows margins are so fine, really.
We're going to turn the page then and we'll see Scotland over the page. So the headline is Scotland the Timid. Now Roxburgh's boys must go for the bold approach. Yeah, look kind of harsh, Rob, like you were saying.
You lads will know a lot more about this than me, but as a kind of casual observer, I think this is the best Scotland side I've seen. I wasn't old enough to understand, I wasn't born in 74, I didn't understand 78 or 82, but I thought they played pretty well against Holland, were a bit unlucky, could have drawn. From memory, they played really well against Germany, who were the world champions and had added the East German players like Sammer. Then they beat a really dangerous, useful CIS side, which in turn allowed Germany to go through. And this is before, it looks like this is written purely on the basis of the Netherlands game, but what they're supposed to be playing against Gullit, Rijkaard, Van Basten, Bergkamp, and they're basically saying they're far too defensive. It just really surprised me how, not vitriolic, but certainly how damning it was. I thought it was really harsh because it was a late goal, wasn't it, from Bergkamp that Scotland lost to.
The thing is, I think at this period, probably Scotland's our thing was our defence. That was the strength of Scotland at the time. So you can absolutely understand why there was so many. Why we did play so defensively like that. But
even so, they had ball players, didn't they? Like McAllister, McStay. Certainly the Germany game, I remember, particularly at 0-0, I remember them having 2 or 3 really good chances. But even in this game, you're right that Gough was obviously... I always thought Gough was really underappreciated in England, actually. Just thought it was a world class. But yeah, it's bloody Holland, for heaven's sake. What are they supposed to do? Play 4-2-4 and bloody press high up the field. Come on.
Yeah. Sorry, Tom.
No, Andy, you go.
I was just going to say something we haven't, it's unusual for us to have got this far into a magazine and we haven't actually touched on the strips at this stage. And, for me, the Scotland one here, blue shirt, white shorts and red socks is, well, red in one, but black in the other. In fact, why is, that must be for a different game, the Stuart McCall one. He's got red socks on. Oh no! Listen, that's Hullet's sock I'm seeing. That's one of my that's probably in one of my top 3 or 4 Scotland strips. The France one and the previous one was it's outstanding. That's a classic Adidas style, isn't it?
Who are the makers? Is it Umbro of Scotland's?
Yeah.
It's really nice, actually. I agree.
And I think
I want to say this was the first tournament they started putting the numbers on the chest.
That sounds about right. Yeah, that definitely sounds right. I always these kits, at the time I always thought Italian 90 was a cut-off point for when kits started to go wrong, because Italian 90 was still kind of crisp and clean, and by this time you get more like little fiddly bits.
Yeah.
But actually, the older I get, the more I really like some of these early 90s ones. I mean, there are some absolute stinkers, but as you say, France, the Adidas ones with the stripes over the shoulder, I used to be a bit wary about, and now I think they look so stylish. Particularly, I think you spoke about this recently in one of the pods, the Marseille one.
Yeah.
But even, I agree with you on Scotland as well. And actually, even the Dutch one I've got a bit of a soft spot for. It's quite kind of simple and
I think
classic. I mean, we'll come to some that are genuinely diabolical, but I think these are all pretty.
Are you thinking the Man United ones?
Particularly the away kit,
and the goalie,
yeah.
So some good photographs there. There's a good one of Richard Gough sort of commanding in the air there. Frank Rijkaard, he's towering over. But what I like, his hair, you can see his hair sort of, it's kind of long, but it's kind of shaved in at the side, and I think just at the back. So it's got a kind of lion's mane effect.
I hadn't noticed that, but you're right. There's some belting haircuts in this whole mag, but that is. Yeah, I don't even know where to stop that.
Yeah, I think
you're right. It actually doesn't look a lion's mane. It's perfectly put.
I think there's a few in that sort of period of time. There was a few close to being mullets, wasn't there? I mean, that's Stuart McCall had one that was close to being a mullet.
You've got to try and have the best of both worlds, aren't you?
Yeah.
Have your mullet and eat it. But,
was it? I think Johnny Vaughan says business at the front, party at the back. So that's what a mullet is. But and the picture you're talking about there, Tom, the one where Gough is towering over Rijkaard, it's reminiscent of the Alex McLeish one against England. You know the one I'm talking about, where he's up winning a header, and it's against Stuart Pearce, Des Walker, and somebody else. It's 3 like really rough, powerful English players, and Alex McLeish is just up powering through them all, and it's a remarkable one. I mean, it's just one player he's up against here, but it's still quite reminiscent of that.
Yeah, I think all of the pictures, I think, really give the impression that it was quite a bruising match. I think that all the they're all kind of quite action shots. They're all sort of rough challenges. I think all of them.
Yeah. So what about the couple of that picture of Gough and that? There's quite a good view of the boots there. Puma for Rijkaard and Adidas for Gough. What about yourself, Rob? And do you still play football? Do you play football?
So funnily enough, I was drawn to Ruud Hullets Lotto boots in the smaller pick. I used to love those. I don't think I ever had any Lottos. But I do. I play like a form of walking football. So I live up in Orkney, and when I came up here, I played football for about 10 years. So I kind of got in touch with the local leisure centre. They said, well, we don't have any games that we can offer you. You join the walking football. It's supposed to be over 50s, but you can play. Anyway, it's turned into a free-for-all. So it's not exactly high speed, but everyone kind of runs what they want. It's just, it's twice a week. It's the highlight of my week, really.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. At first, when we first started, it was genuinely like that Father Ted or that Still Game episode. But now it feels fast. It probably still looks like that Father Ted episode, but it's fantastic. But I wear obviously it's indoors, so I just wear kind of boring Adidas. I've got this is so boring. I got plantar fasciitis, so I spent ages researching the best boots to get for that, or the best indoor shoes to get for that. So yeah, but I, as a kid, I think I used to. The pair of trainers I remember most fondly are a pair of Diodoras I had, maybe around '89. I don't even know why or what kind of attracted me to those, but yeah, I don't remember what I'd have been wearing around this time. Yeah, how about you, lads? You always kind of stuck to one brand, or?
I mean, in terms of brand, I mean, growing up, I don't remember there ever really being a huge selection of boots. But then again, even if I was, we weren't blessed with the wealth to choose what we got. So it would have been your sort of Woolworths boots and things like that. But whenever I've had a choice, I've always went with Adidas. I've just always found them comfortable. They look good until my last pair of boots, which I bought, which was my first ever Pumas, Puma Kings, and they were absolutely outstanding. I didn't realise how good they were.
When do you'll probably notice from the magazines, when do coloured boots start to creep in? Because they're all black boots here.
Well, early on, I mean, early 70s, maybe even just a little bit before that was the first of the white boots. So you had likes of Alan Ball, there was Alan Hinton, and then there was the Scottish players, a few in Dundee United. We've got photographs of the Clydebank team, haven't we? With a full
well, technically the Clydebank team were first. Alan Ball was supposedly first, but Clydebank played in the Charity Shield, so the 1970 Charity Shield match, where he was actually playing in Adidas boots painted white with chevrons, because it was meant to be Hummel boots he was wearing. But Clydebank played a friendly on the Monday night against Aston Villa, where all the team bar one, Mick Jackson, used to play with Celtic, wore white boots. Again, white Hummels.
But, I meant to ask you actually, just on Clydebank, what's the commentary at the start? I think I know the first two, Mill and Charlie Nicholas, but I noticed you'd slipped the Clydebank goal in. I just wondered, was it a famous goal?
Well, not particularly. It's from Sports Scene, so Clydebank were very rarely on Sports Scene. We maybe be on Sports Scene maybe 3 times or something like that, usually when other games were off. I remember one game we were on against Hamilton in the snow, just because every other match was called off. But this game was against the Albion Rovers. I want to see the Premier League was off that week. Maybe it was first of the kind of international weeks, but it was against Albion Rovers, and Clydebank won 4-3. And that was the winning goal in the last minute. It's just a very rare Clydebank game where there's actually Archie McPherson commentary.
Yeah, it was Kenny Day was the player that gets mentioned, and who is it sets it up for him?
Jim
Hughes. Yeah. That's right. The player of the match for me or something. Yeah.
We'll maybe change it up for the.
No, I think it's great. I think it's really good because it actually had me racking my brain. I listened back to it a few times and then picked up the Clydebank and I thought, that must be it. That's also a word that I've never heard it before. With all due respect, sorry, that sounded bad, but yeah, because I'm familiar with the other two. Just from old clips and stuff.
But back about the boots. Talking about Hummel were the first ones. Although I have seen white Adidas boots from back then as well. But there's an advert where it's the white Hummel, and there's also they look pink. They look sort of pink, but I think they're a sort of reddish pink. But they're really nice ones as well. And I'm thinking the Liverpool player,
Tommy Smith.
Tommy Smith, I think, wore red boots. Yeah, I think.
Oh, maybe that would kind of fit the profile, I guess. Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah, there's one of George Graham, the other Arsenal player.
Charlie George.
Charlie George. Yeah.
No. The other Scottish player who managed Arsenal as well.
No, Frank McClintock.
There's a front of a shoot magazine, and it's they're sort of tossing up for kick-off, and it's him and Billy Bremner, and Billy Bremner's pointing down at him, laughing at his boots. But actually, when the colour ones started coming, it's obviously later than this, and I don't really know a date that I can say that's when it happened.
It feels like kind of late 90s, but I couldn't tell. I couldn't pinpoint it either.
I think we've commented certainly a way back on the show, that maybe a couple of times where I think it was the bottom of the boot started being colourful before anything
Yeah,
else.
kind of little touches. Yeah.
You know.
What's the most recent mag you've done, by the way?
What would that have been? Would have been. Well, the first one we did would have been 90, wouldn't it? But we've certainly done 90.
Did Euro 96 with Mark Billingham, because
Right.
with Mark Billingham, his latest novel was centred around Euro 96. So we did a Euro 96 special, with him. I can't recall that it was doing a later one.
I don't think we have. No, 96 sounds about right. That one sounds about right. But then again, I have in my head. I've always had in my head. I say always, people say that, but it's like, it's not as if when I was a wee boy I had this in my head. But the cut-off for me, for nostalgia, is 1992.
That's
that's what I think. Anything later than that, and I've got, you can see the magazines and stuff behind me. I've got magazines later than that but I don't really connect with them as well as I do earlier ones, because it's full of adverts. It's it doesn't have the same sort of feel as the magazines I remember growing up. So 1992 for me is what I sort of say, right after that, for me, it's not nostalgic anymore.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I've seen people who get nostalgic about stuff in the 2000s, and I'm
Last
like,
week,
no,
yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. I think I would naturally be a bit later, more kind of late 90s. But yeah, I totally, I completely take the point.
Yeah.
And actually it kind of fits to 92 as well, because obviously so much changed.
I don't think it's related to the start of the Premiership. I don't think it's related to that, but
The magazines and stuff.
Yeah. I think that just the magazines changed at that point, or that's when I think that the cut off was. But you've got to have a cut off at some point, I think.
You certainly do.
The thing is, you probably would have been exposed to more football at that time. There would have been more football on the telly, and there would have been more coverage of football.
Yeah.
At that time.
You just, I think, it's like before life starts getting in the way as well.
Yeah.
You just say it's just everything, isn't
it? So we can over to Carlton Palmer on the next page. Back at the back, Palmer finally returns to the job he loves. And some pictures of Carlton Palmer there playing against Brazil, probably in this summer.
It was a friendly just before the Euros, I think, which I must say I'd completely forgotten about. I remember them playing them the following year in the US Cup. But yeah, it was a friendly that summer. They drew 1-1, I think.
So there's a kind of quite a snidey wee caption there by Shoot that says, because Shoot is the only football magazine actually out in Sweden, but also the only mag able to talk to the stars of England and Scotland. So while others are filling their pages with stale news and second-hand gossip, we're able to go to the men at the heart of the action. It's another reason for sticking with football's biggest seller.
It's a bit, I know, that really stood out to me. It's like football magazine version of the tabloid wars of the 80s, isn't it? I guess they have really dig at Match. Would there be any other mags around that time? Yeah,
I think that was definitely there.
Yeah, they really push it, don't they, everywhere? Like the previous page, I think, says first for the action or something. Or Shoot first with a big match action. Kind of, I don't know, just it stood out as the kind of thing you'd expect to see in a tabloid. I don't know, if you're 16 years old reading this, it's going to completely wash over you, I guess.
Yeah.
But I did think it was interesting, because you're right, it's kind of a big statement right in the middle of the spread, or in the middle of the interview.
So interesting wee bit. Opening, Carlton Palmer is set to become a sweeping success for England in the role Ron Atkinson forced him to abandon. The 26-year-old utility man began his career as a centre-half in Atkinson's West Brom team of the 80s, but had to give up his favourite role following injury and one of Big Ron's notorious spending sprees. So I couldn't have told you that about Carlton Palmer, certainly.
No, I couldn't really. I remember, obviously, he played quite a lot in the middle. I'd forgotten he played. I knew England played a sweeper against France, but I'd forgotten it was him. But it sounds like he played pretty well. I mean, he's obviously kind of short. I feel like him and Jeff Thomas are kind of shorthand for the worst of the Taylor years, which is a little bit harsh. I mean, he was clearly pretty good at what he did, which, wasn't particularly creative, but I don't know. I sometimes feel a bit sorry when they pick those worst England teams, and him and Thomas always appear and always show the chip. You think, they're still ultimately, if you played five-a-side against someone like him, he'd make you look a right prick all day long. But yeah, he actually, from memory, I thought he did okay in this tournament. And I think when England failed to qualify subsequently for the World Cup, I don't think it was particularly his fault. And everyone says they should have played more creative players, but ultimately you do have to have a balance. I mean, the midfield was always going to have Platt and Gascoigne when he was available, which he was for the World Cup qualifiers. So they needed people like Palmer and Paul Ince. So yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if being too kind on Palmer, and maybe he was just as crap as everyone remembers. But I think he did from memory, he did a decent enough job within his kind of obvious limitations. And actually, at Sheffield Wednesday, he was very good. They were a really good side around this period. Finished third, I think, in 91-92. Were in the title race till the penultimate weekend. The following year, they got to 2 cup finals, lost them both to Arsenal. But yeah, I mean, I don't think he was as bad as people remember anyway, put it that way.
I think a lot of it, and it probably touches on it in here, and even read comments nowadays about it, just his style of play probably brought him, people giving them grief simply because his style of play, I hate to use the word, but gangly, leggy.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think the fact physically, and I mean, it might also be a race they're getting that time, I don't know, but certainly the way he ran and everything, he was very ungainly. I do agree. I think that was part of the reason there was so much kind of criticism.
There's a wee bit in that article there that says he was also affected by criticism from those people who disliked his ungainly style and the fact he couldn't pass the ball as well as some players. Because there's an interesting wee bit there where he talks about his nerves and how he worried about whether he could perform properly on the pitch, and talks about his mental approach, how that's improved.
Yeah, that surprised me actually, because have you heard him be interviewed recently? He's done a few podcasts and stuff, and he's the most confident man in the world. He just basically, he talks about people criticising him, and he just kind of used to tell them, yeah, look how much I'm earning and so on. They couldn't give a toss, really. He used to call out Letitia on getting fewer caps than him. So it surprised me to read that he used to suffer from nerves that much. Maybe built up a shield over time because he got so much abuse. I don't know.
Yeah. So what do we think of that England shirt? I think it's quite a smart England away.
Yeah. So this is still the 1990 lot, isn't it? Still the same kits, I think. Because they've got that little kind of the collar, you can just about see it, and it's the same with the one Lineker's wearing on the front. Yeah, I think they're pretty nice. And then they go into, they start to get a bit uglier. I think they had a blue kit around this time, which wasn't so good. That they may have worn in Czechoslovakia when they played them before the tournament. But yeah, I think they did pretty nice. Umbro around this time were kind of really big players, weren't they?
Yeah.
They would come later to them signing up Man United, or Man United signing up them, whichever way they put it. And I remember having like Umbro drill tops around this time. They were a really big thing, and kind of slowly faded towards the end of the 90s, I guess. But yeah, I quite like it. What do you think about the Brazil one?
Yeah, I mean, this Brazil.
It's not great. It's all right, but
yeah, I seem to think my younger brother may have had one of those from that time. But what I was going to ask is that England top the same design as the white one, but just in red?
I think it is, but only because of the collar and the bit around the arm as well. I'm pretty sure it is. I wouldn't swear to it, but I think it is.
The reason I ask is because I didn't particularly like that white one that was on the previous ones, and I didn't think it was one of England's better ones, but I like that red one. And it's fascinating if it's the same design, just how making it a different colour just lifts it up.
And it's also fascinating how often the association leads to the memory of the kit. Like, we'll come to the Denmark one, I think, later, which I really like, but when I look at it objectively, I think it's kind of hideous. I think it's just because of the association, whereas the 86 Denmark kit is kind of a classic on both counts, visually and the association. But yeah, interesting about the England. I don't know, I'd have to check, but I'm pretty sure it's the same design.
Yeah. And something I touch on as well a lot is the shape and size of kits. So you can see at this point, even the Brazil one and the England one, they're getting pretty massive and shapeless as well.
And also the fabric is changing, isn't it? Because you think of Socrates in '86 with that lovely topper kit and kind of massive sweat patches. I assume it's much more cotton than polyester in those days, but also really tight to the skin. But you're right, yeah. You can see them kind of billowing. And I know Palmer was pretty skinny, but you can see it on all the players. Even I think it's Ray in the bottom right. I think you can see it kind of billowing a bit on him. Yeah.
All right, we're good going over the page then. Over the page is an advert. The first of more than about two adverts for Umbro. This is Umbro trainers. Umbro trainers look good on the surface, whatever the surface, and it's a kind of mix and match picture of different Umbro trainers showing AstroTurf and I don't know. It looks like green baize from here, rather. So it's a sort of brick.
This confused me to begin with. I wasn't quite sure what was going on.
Yeah, same here. I wasn't sure what they were boasting about, but actually, I think I missed the different type of surfaces thing. So the sole of the boot. But yeah, I kind of get it now. But that completely passed me by. I read it and thought I wasn't entirely clear what they were talking about.
Yeah, and it took me a little while to actually realise it was a composite of 3 different boots as well. I just thought that's a bit strange. You know, then it was...
I printed this off in black and white, which didn't help, but I'm now looking at the screen in colour, and yeah, I can kind of see it a bit better now. But yeah, no, I was exactly the same.
Yeah.
There's also the ball looks as if it's soaking wet as well, I guess.
Yeah.
You can play in the wet with it, yeah. But yeah, so that's the three surfaces. Indoors, AstroTurf, asphalt.
Interestingly, Tom, it's you don't often see adverts, and I guess they've done it deliberately, where there's no mention of price or anything like that. It's just advertising the items, and there's nothing that says see your stockists or whatever. So they're obviously relying on the brand, which would have been huge at the time. It's just a case of, right, here we go, this is what we're selling. Now go away and find it of your own accord.
Yeah, I suppose you create that want for the item. In my recollection is it took Umbro a while to sort of do trainers and football boots. I think like Umbro had the strips, like the Scotland strip and all that in the 80s, but they didn't do footwear, I don't think, till maybe the early 90s.
Do you know what? I think you're right, because I recall having, when I was at university, I had a pair of Umbro football boots, and yeah, I don't recall. Now you've mentioned it, I don't recall much in the way of Umbro boots, trainers or that prior to this sort of period. So maybe, yeah, you're probably about right, early 90s.
Yeah, the same actually. I had never thought about that, but I associate it much more with just obviously kits, but also, like I was saying, drill tops and stuff like that, tracky tops. Yeah, it's I hadn't really thought of that, but yeah, I have the same kind of feeling.
You know what? Just as a wee bit of trivia, Roger Bannister ran the first 4-minute mile wearing an Umbro kit.
Oh, really?
Yeah, apparently so.
I'm surprised they don't make more of that. They should be doing it every year, selling. They bring out all those vintage things like the New Order and the factory record stuff. I'm surprised they didn't do that with Roger Bannister.
Yeah. Right, over the page again then. So again, this is another, as if we hadn't had enough of England's not being very good. Another 2 pages on just not good enough England. Shoot gives it to you straight. So in this time, there's some photographs from the 0-0 draw with Denmark. And like you were saying, Andy, there seems to be a lot of just sort of filling space. There's 3 England crests there down the side of the page for no real reason.
Oh, it's sort of 3 lines, except it's now 9 lines, isn't it?
And again, some good photographs, some good action pictures there. Stuart Pearce and there's again Chris Woods, this time being saved by the post. This time no Andy Sinton in the line, but John Jensen's shot bounces back off the post. And a good one there, Keith Currell, sort of resorting to shirt pulling.
John Jensen is somebody that I think it was this tournament that I just remember. He kept on trying long distance shots.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're like, just stop it. And then he delivered, didn't he? He delivered.
There's a really nice film called I think I'm probably going to mispronounce it, Odet va Denmark, and it was Denmark or something, but it's all about Danish football from about 82 to 92. So it takes in the Dynamite team in the mid 80s, but also this. And there's a lovely little montage of exactly that, basically. And they put it together really well. It's just bang over the bar, bang miles away. And there's something like John Jensen, please, but the context is something like that. Then of course you get to the final and he gives them a lead with an absolute screamer.
Yeah.
So he almost had like the whole thing with his Arsenal career when it became a standing joke. He almost had that squashed into 2 weeks at the Euros. Yeah, it's quite funny.
Is that a documentary, Rob?
Yeah, it's one I got years and years ago. A lad I know in Denmark sent it to me. Like, this is going way back, like 12, 13 years. But yeah, basically it's just a documentary of that kind of golden period. It's really nice, actually.
Because there's a feature film of the...
Yeah, which I haven't watched.
I quite enjoyed it.
Oh, is it good? I probably should, actually. But yeah, I watched that documentary because I was researching like a long piece on the Dynamite team, which then later, a few years later, became a book. But yeah, but it included 92 as well. Yeah, that always stands out to me, the way they cut the montage. It was it was kind of fairly kind of simple cutting, but it worked really well. Just bang, bang, constantly belting it into orbit. Yeah.
So Shoot doesn't mention the Denmark players there, but can you tell us anything about the Danes on show in those pictures?
Yeah, I mean, they're a fairly prosaic team compared to the 80s. I mean, obviously we don't see Peter Schmeichel here. He was probably the star. The big picture appears challenging Flemming Poulsen, who I think is such an underrated player. He had a really good career at Dortmund as well. Just a really clever mobile forward. Was perfect for this team because they played a hell of a lot on the counter-attack with him and Brian Laudrup. Yeah, really intelligent, good movement, run all day, good with the ball. I was trying to work out who the guy at the bottom challenging on Smith is. I think it's Lars Olsen, one of the centre-backs, but I'm not certain. The one big pullback by Keith Curl, I'm pretty sure, is Henrik Anderson, who was the left wing-back. And he's quite an interesting one because I don't know much about him before or since, but he had an amazing tournament. He looked so good, like one of the best players of the tournament. But then he got one of those horror injuries against Holland in the semis. I think he fractured a kneecap. And there are pictures of him just like screaming, and it looks like something out of a David Cronenberg film, like his knees kind of bubbling and pulsing. It's really awful. I've always meant to actually look up because he looked absolutely world class, but I don't really know much about him before or after. They were a fairly kind of straightforward counter-attacking team in a way. I mean, they had probably a guy who was emerging as best keeper in the world, 2 world-class forwards. The rest of them were just kind of, for want of a better phrase, kind of good on his pros, really. But it worked, and they had also Henrik Larsson was a bit of a fairy tale because he was kind of an unknown midfielder who scored twice against. Let me think. He scored once against France, but they beat them to go through, and he scored twice against the Netherlands in the semis. And I think he actually ended up. I think Villa took him on loan the following season in the hope they could kind of have a bit of that magic, and it didn't really work. But yeah, I would say the stars were Schmeichel, Henrik Anderson in this tournament, and certainly Poulsen and Brian Laudrup. And there were also some great kind of individual stories. John Jensen, obviously. Kim Vilfort was a really kind of poignant story because his daughter was dying of leukemia at the time, so he was flying back and forth from Sweden to Denmark to be with her, and then he scored in the final. So yeah, that was kind of the
that feature film uses that.
Does it use, because there's always some stories around them, and I don't know how much of it is myth and how much of it is true. One is about them playing crazy golf, I think, on the day of a game. One was about them going to it changes from McDonald's to Burger King and back, but
there is.
Yeah, it's so interesting. It just shows and I know football's a bit different now, it's a bit even more sophisticated, but even then there was so much that went into planning and preparing. And you can have a team who were kind of preparing to go on holiday, who didn't even qualify, turn up. First 2 games didn't look a lot. Jensen hit the post against England, but England were probably a better team. Beaten fairly well by Sweden, even though it was only 1-0. And then they win 3 games, won them on penalties, and win the tournament. It just almost makes a mockery of all that preparation and everything else. But it's such a lovely story. It's interesting that Euros produce these stories more than the World Cup. You think Greece, probably less charm to Greece because people didn't like where they played that much, even if in reality they weren't that much different to Denmark, really. it feels like there's much more scope for it in that tournament than there is in the World Cup. We've never really had a kind of crazy win of the World Cup in the way we have in the Euros.
Yeah. So there's a quote there at the start of this from Graham Taylor where he appears to be channeling Ali MacLeod.
Yeah.
He says, sit back, enjoy yourselves, and watch us win it.
You know, I'm surprised more that hasn't gone down into history the way Eddie McLeod's has. But I do remember it at the time, not thinking a lot of that. And you see it repeated occasionally, but not very often. I mean, this is obviously contemporary, so it's still in people's minds. But you don't really read about it much now as one of the great errant statements of our time.
Yeah.
But yeah, he definitely said it. I do remember that being a thing at the time.
Okay, so we move on then.
Yep.
So we'll go with the first page here. We've got Ali McCoist. Marco's my hero, and again they're making good use of these crests. There's a Scotland crest and a Dutch crest there, and it's a picture of Ali McCoist and a wee cut-out picture of Marco van Basten. So Ali McCoist may be Europe's Golden Boot winner, but even he admits to being in awe of the impressive lineup of hitmen at the European Championship. The Scotland star has been in seventh heaven this week, just being on the same pitch as Jurgen Klinsmann, Rudi Volla and Marco van Basten. The striker Ali rates is the best of the lot. So yeah, you can't really argue there. I think Van Basten was class at that time.
Yeah. And we know obviously what happened. It's kind of sad, isn't it, how quickly he went after this.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you two actually about McCoist in international football, and especially at major tournaments. Was it too much a step up, or was it just that they didn't get enough service, or the circumstances were wrong? Because I mean, I guess particularly in this tournament, this is the peak of his club career, isn't it? Around this period.
Yeah, absolutely.
When he's winning the European Golden Boot and stuff.
I think it sort of touches on it that Scotland weren't very creative at this point, you know, and that didn't. Alan McCoist was a natural goal scorer. He was scoring any situation really. I think if he got more balls to him, you know, he would have scored more goals. So I think a lot of it's to do with. I don't think it was too much a step up for him.
So it's not like he's missing chances or anything. He's just not getting them.
To be honest, I couldn't tell you that sort of detail.
It kind of feels that way, certainly. I don't remember it being. What was the state of play with him at Italia 90? Was he around then?
Yeah, he was, yeah.
But who would they have had? Who else? Fleck?
Yep, Alan McInally.
Oh, yeah, of course. He played against Costa Rica, didn't he, McInally?
Yeah, Boris Johnson.
So there's a story that I think it's Ali that tells it. There was Mo Johnson and who was it? Roxburgh that was the manager at the time. And he came in to the team and says, right, Mo and Ali are starting. And he thought it was Mo and Ali, but it was Mo and Ali, McInally. So he sort of tells that one.
That's a decent set of forwards, though. When you add someone like Gordon Jury as well, who also was a really good player. It's a decent group of forwards around that period.
See, I sometimes I get carried away myself with things like that, and I sometimes wonder, at the time, were they as good as, you know, we think they were, or, you know, were they possibly all at their peak at different times, but because it's in the past, we're maybe placing it all together.
I think there's such a tendency to do that. I mean, I was thinking also about the group of forwards you had in '86, people like Nicholas and Archibald, but actually they're just not at their peak, are they? There's a time when Man United had a midfield and front line of Giggs, Keane, Scholes, Ronaldo, Rooney, and Van Nistelrooy. You look at that and think, geez, that is out. But they were crap because Rooney and Ronaldo hadn't matured. The other lot were either past their best or having a slump. So you're right. It's so easy to forget when you look back at kind of where people were at that moment in their careers.
And well, I mean, even there was a period of time where Kenny Dalglish wasn't good for Scotland. You know, was getting, or people were wanting him dropped, or you know, and you think Kenny Dalglish, that ever happened to Kenny Dalglish?
Yeah, no, it's true. We tend to remember the best, don't we, rather than the kind of the average periods and the poorer periods, definitely.
But at this time, I think, Tom, it's McCoist would have been the European Golden Boot holder at this time.
Yeah, I think it says that, in the article, yeah.
the very reason that they then changed the rules behind it.
Oh, is that when they added like so his goals are worth half or something? For God's sake.
Yeah. But I love the photograph, Ali, because I don't know if you've ever seen the film A Shot at Glory. Rob, have you ever seen that?
I haven't, no.
So
What's it? Tell me about it.
So it's Alan McCoist is the main lead, and there's Robert Duvall's in it. He's the other one. So I mean, it's straight from that you're like, what?
Yeah.
But it's McCoist is an ex Celtic player of all things, and he's now playing for a small club who, there's an American investor, and basically they go on this cup run, meet Rangers in the final, and all sorts of ensue. I'm a fan of it. I like it.
It's not a terrible film at all.
What sort of period was it made?
It was made in 1999. So I went along to be an extra at Hampden for the final when they because Kilmarnock, the team, get to play Rangers in the final. So me and a few of my mates were at Hampden Park as extras, as making up the crowd scene. It's partly based on what was happening with Clydebank, because Clydebank were getting shifted to Dublin. So that's part of the story as well. Michael Keaton, as the American owner, is going to move Kilmarnock to Dublin. And then Robert Duvall was about in Scotland a lot. He was hanging about in Glasgow and at the BBC bar and stuff like that for a while, And there's a sort of infamous picture of him where he gets stitched up at the 98 Scottish Cup final between Rangers and Hearts, where somebody handed him a scarf to hold above his head, and it's an Ulster. He's holding up instead of his Ranger. There was a lot of, sort of footballers of the day were in it. Owen Coyle's in it. Didier Agat's in it.
Yeah, Brian Cox was a Rangers manager, so I mean
Brian Cox, yeah, it's worth the watch.
That sounds all right. Yeah,
and actually McCoist is not bad.
What's it called again?
A Shot
at Glory.
Yeah.
Let me scribble that down.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I'll send you either a link of it or a copy of it, because I streamed it a year or two ago or something. I sort of did a live stream on Periscope or YouTube or something like that. And I was sort of hoping that people would chat about it, but I think a few people just watched it. But I had in my head that this was going to be rubbish. I watched it, and what I liked about it, how many football films have you seen, or just sports films where the action's never that good? It doesn't have the intensity.
So bad, yeah.
Now the action scenes, the football scenes in this, I think, are really good. They're a bit slower than you would expect from real football, but it still feels like real football. Within some it's within reason, but it's just the photograph here. There's a few sultry shots in the movie of where they're getting lighting on his eyes and stuff like that, and that's what this photograph here reminds me of.
But it's odd that after his playing career, he didn't go into management. He done that film where he was a lead in a motion picture, and like I say, he's actually no bad in it. And then he was a chat show host, because it was McCoist and Macaulay did a chat show on BBC Scotland for a few series, and he did that before going into managing Rangers like several years later. And to my knowledge, I don't think he's acted in anything else since. Even though I think Robert Duvall was talking him up for the Hollywood about that time,
Yeah.
Facing page is another advert for Umbro, and not the last advert for Umbro that we'll see in the magazine. And it's the greatest football kit in the world. And the Premier League, Europe and the world waits, but you don't have to. The new 92-93 home and away kits are available from the Manchester United Superstore now. And there we go. Here is the new Manchester United home kit and the absolutely disgusting away kit. The two goalkeeper jerseys modelled by Peter Schmeichel. So what do we reckon?
I don't mind the home one. Aston Villa had a similar one, didn't they, with the laces around the neck?
Yeah.
I mean, the away one is indescribable, really. But they had blue around that time. I can't even begin. They've got like flecks on it, but the worst part, I think, is the fact they have the badge. Like, half the badge is all the way across. I can't even describe it.
It's like a post frank, isn't it? It's like a
exactly. Yeah.
But
no.
I think without that, it would have been. Yeah, I don't like it, but with that, it turns it into what the hell is that? Yeah. It's not good at all.
I'm trying to think if they wore it much. I think they wore it when they won at Liverpool in early March, which was like a really big win on the way to the title. And they might have done. I mean, they'd have worn it a few times because then they introduced halfway through the season. They introduced that Newton Heath one, the yellow and green halves, which I actually really liked. But
that was in the same style as the home one with the.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So that came in mid-season. I'm not entirely sure why, but I think they.
I think we can see why. I think we can see why.
Well, yeah. But the thing is, they wore this one after because they wore the Newton Heath one at Sheffield United, I think, in mid-Feb in the Cup. Then they'd have worn this in March at Liverpool. But yeah, the other thing actually, and again, you'll probably know more about this, but it feels like this was a period when goalkeeper kits were starting to get really just bad and just a bit too kind of the equivalent of a clown mask.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Nadir is probably David Seaman at Euro '96, but these two for Schmeichel, they're not great, really.
Do you know? I was going to touch on this because I had a goalkeeper strip of this period that was very similar. So it was more similar to the dark blue one, but it was sort of black and dark colours. So the pattern wasn't really. So it was like blacks and oranges, dark oranges. So the patterns weren't as obvious as that. But yeah, that was the style at the time, including the high round collar as well, which was the style. I was just back to that away strip. I mean, it's light blue. It's Man City colours, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, it's slightly darker, but yeah, I suppose it is. And it had the one before that was blue with, I don't know how you would describe it, the funny one with kind of blue and white little kind of chevrons. But they'd always, I suppose it is closer because if you go back to the 80s, the blue they wore would definitely be a lot darker and a lot richer. So nothing like City. I've never really thought about it in kind of City context because theirs is more a sky blue, but I see what you mean. Yeah. The other thing I've noticed, which I've forgotten about, is the shorts on the home kit, which aren't great either, with that big Umbro symbol around Mark Hughes' modelling it around his left thigh. That doesn't look great either, really.
I was looking at the shorts on the away one. I don't even know what it is, whether it's a badge or something, but on the what do you call it, the top of the shorts, there's something. I quite like that.
It looks like a little clip button or something, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's really pointless, but I know what you mean. Yeah. I do quite like little details like that. I think the problem around this summer were just too many of them or too much going on. But I agree. I like little things like that that just kind of make it ever so slightly different from the norm. I suppose it's just personal taste because they probably think on the home shorts that having the Umbro thing serves a similar purpose. But no.
But that's the thing about kits that we spoke about quite a bit is they become classics depending on the success that they get. You know, you can have the worst kit of all time, but you associate it with a cup win, so it's like, that's a great kit, greatest kit of all time.
Is there an example from Scotland that is particularly iconic purely because of what the team did? I'm trying to think, like Aberdeen and Dundee United, their kits were pretty good, weren't they, in the 80s?
Yeah.
I can't think of any off the top of my head. I can't think.
Actually, my knowledge of Scottish kits isn't that good, but the ones that come to mind actually are all pretty decent. Celtic and Rangers is only so far wrong you can go, I guess.
Yeah.
Do you know what? I'm going to take that one away. That's a good.
But I do think Denmark is an example, which is in this issue. Denmark '92. Like I would happily wear that walking football, but it's not a good kit. I know that objectively, purely because it's just the association.
Yeah, and I guess back to English teams as well. Norwich City, they had that speckled one,
the bird shit kit, as which is kind of associated with them all almost winning the league. Yeah. Do you know they had a kit just before that? They challenged for the league in 88-89 for quite a long time. Around that period, they had a lovely A6 kit, or A6 as they pronounce it, but it goes for so much on eBay now. But I think it's one of the great kind of forgotten kits. It's worth looking up. It's either 88 to 90 or it might be 89 to 92 even. But it looks so good.
Is this a yellow with the green? Is it the green
it looks really, really
like
good, I think. Yeah, I have no affiliation to Norwich, but I'd love to. I've kind of given up trying to get it cheap on eBay because people clearly have alerts. So you get excited, it'll be on for 10 quid, and within 4 hours it's up to like 80 quid and rising. But yeah, I think that's one of the great forgotten kits of the modern. I was going to say the modern era, Jesus. Yeah. But yeah, you know what I mean.
But you look at I don't know if you were going to touch on this, Tom, about the prices. I mean, the prices are starting to shoot right up, aren't they, as well? I mean, £30 for the shirts, shorts for £13 and £18. And so that wasn't cheap. When you sort of compare it to 55p for the magazine, that's a huge number of magazines you'd be paying for that.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably the start of the, we were saying earlier on how the England shirt was getting the same as the 1990 England shirt, but now this is the start of kits changing every season. And I mean, that home goalkeeper top and away goalkeeper top, I mean, you never had them. It was a goalkeeper top, you never had a home and away.
I think United led the way with that, didn't they? Particularly with away kits. Once the Premier League era started, it became a kind of a standing joke about how often they changed them. I think the home kits for the first few years were every 2 years, but the away kit would then often have 2 different ones every season. Excuse me. So yeah, they definitely led the way with that, certainly in England anyway. I don't know if led the way is the right term, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
One thing that struck me is just I'd forgotten all about the way you ordered these kits. I mean, it's obvious now, so it was at the time, but you fill in your name, your address. I always remember, or it feels like I remember, like really trying to write my address as small as possible, but still make it legible on these little forms you had to cut out. And you had to cut them really carefully. And even things, I'm just looking at it here, name, address, postcode, daytime telephone number. If you're a kid, what are you going to do? Put your mum's work number or something? I mean, put your school number? I don't know how that worked. But yeah, it's stuff like that. It's such a time capsule, but it's quite funny to actually see it. So you forget all about the kind of how, not inconvenient, but it was just normal at the time, just the way we actually bought. I always remember my mum had to travel for ages to buy the Denmark 86 kit for my brother. I think she must have bought, I can't remember. I know she had to go a long way, like at least 30, 40 miles and phone places and everything. And now you think it's so easy to buy anything you like. It's a different world, I guess.
So what is the connection with Denmark, Rob?
Nothing really. My brother was, so I'd have been 10 in 86, and I watched what I was quite a late starter really in terms of properly being invested, but my brother always loved that kit. And then I kind of, the more I kind of found out about them, the more interested I became. And when I was at The Guardian, when I first started, I met a guy called Lars Eriksson working there. He was from Copenhagen, and we got chatting about it. And it just became more and more fascinating, really. It just seemed such a good story. Just that's it really. Like all of them, you kind of dig a bit deeper, find out a bit more. So originally we did a long article for The Guardian in 2009 on them. Went down pretty well. Thought, well, maybe we should try and do a book, and then we eventually managed to get a publisher. And just one of the best times of my life, really, being in Copenhagen. And they were so accessible. That's the other thing. The players, even Michael Laudrup. I mean, it seems still doesn't seem real that I sat in Swansea for an hour with Michael Laudrup. Genuinely. I know people say it all the time, but it just doesn't. But yeah, the players who were in Copenhagen were so accessible. Just such a fun time. The more you found out, the more interesting it became, and also the more fun it became, just to kind of get to know the characters and everything else. So it wasn't. I do remember them at the time. I do vaguely remember, particularly my brother getting this kit. My mum kind of all the trouble she went to, but I didn't I didn't experience it. The 86 team this is at the time really, but it's just something I'm kind of found out more subsequently. And it's interesting because I remember 92 and I love 92, and I wouldn't have thought then that I would find the 86 team far more interesting, because 92 they won it, they had Schmeichel, who I really liked at the time, but yeah, just the 86 team, and I just think they're kind of endlessly fascinating, really.
All right, we're going over the page again, Andy. So
yep.
We'll just dispense with the third Umbro advert which is just a big picture of the Manchester United shirt, and it says Manchester United have signed one of the biggest names in football. And looking at the picture, you would think that is Sharp, as the Sharp logo is just right in the middle of the page, the biggest thing on it. But no, Matthias Gullit, Careca, Baggio, no, Umbro, official kit supplier to the world's greatest teams. And it's quite a smart looking picture of the Man United, close up of the Man United shirt.
Yeah.
And on the left-hand side of the page is an absolute, just a page filler. It's a feature called Here Today, Gone Tomorrow, and it's compiled by Steve. And it's basically old pictures of players and managers and hairstyles that they no longer have. So I think we can probably pick out a few of the faces there. Ian Porterfield, Leo Brady.
Les Seeley, number 2, I think.
Andy Ritchie, number 10, is it?
Oh, yeah, it's Steve Archibald, obviously. Jack Charlton, Brian Robson.
Yeah, John Burridge is an absolute belter, though. That is a number 5.
Is that Burridge?
Yeah.
Is Burridge number 5?
Yeah.
Oh, my God. That looks like a judge's wig that someone got bored with halfway through and just stopped.
Yeah.
I didn't realise that was him at all.
And it says that Terry Venables and Howard Kendall.
Yeah.
Howard Kendall at Birmingham.
Liam Brady, obviously. Is number 12? Is that Don Howe?
I think it is. Yeah.
I mean, some are more. I mean, some are more striking than others. Yeah, 5's a belter. I suppose. Yeah, 10. Andy Ritchie makes me think a bit like Jaws from the James Bond film, the way he's smiling there. But yeah.
The thing is, though, that I mean, I don't think Andy Ritchie's hair looks too bad, and neither does.
No.
Howard
A lot of them are actually
Kendall
just a few kind of frizzier efforts, but they were kind of standard for the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, 5 is John Burridge is definitely the one that stands out to me.
Yeah. I'd put it Steve Archibald pretty close as well.
Yeah.
But it's not just the hair and the moustache, it's the goalkeeper top with the sort of polo
yeah.
goalie shirt as well.
That very you've seen these old album covers, that are religious ones and stuff. I actually used that photograph years ago on an album cover. And so
that's brilliant.
I sort of put it in. It was sort of parried on. There was like 3 sort of Christian or whatever American Deep South sort of look to it.
Yeah.
So you can imagine what that might have looked like.
Right, so we're going over again. So this one is, ladies and gentlemen, Shoot is proud to introduce the new Des Walker, who is also the old Des Walker. So another nice picture of the England away kit. Des Walker is squaring up to the biggest test of his life without the man who turned him into one of the world's greatest defenders. For the last 10 years, Forest boss Brian Clough has been the inspiration between Walker's rise to the very top. But now Des is coming out of his shell and preparing for life without the man he still refers to as Gaffer. So this is Des Walker moving to Italy, and there's a wee picture of him there in his Sampdoria shirt. Sampdoria will be expecting Des to look after the best of the opposition strikers, says David Platt. He will be up against players of the quality of Van Basten, Papan and Vialli week in, week out, and will be told, mark them out of the game. So, Rob, so Des Walker at Sampdoria.
Yeah, it's a sad story, this, because it kind of didn't go very well, did it? I think he ended up playing at left back quite a lot, which is just wrong. I mean, I think he's one of the most underappreciated England players, certainly in my lifetime. I think his good period, and it didn't last that long, it'd probably be about 88, probably to him going to Sampdoria. I thought he was just immense. Italia 90, he's arguably England's best player. I know we romanticise Gaza for obvious reasons. I thought he was, I don't know what you think, I thought he was so good. There's a lovely bit, I've watched the semi-final a couple of times, and there's a bit towards the end in extra time when, and it's only a small thing, but Klinsmann heads the ball beyond him and he's got a start on him and you think that they're in trouble here. And he's just so fast, so comfortable, just goes back and clears it. He just looked brilliant. And he seemed made for Italy, particularly because of the whole man marking thing that Platt talks about. You'll never beat Des Walker and all that. Apparently he used to sing that, he used to kind of sing that in Gary Lineker's ear. You'll never beat Des Walker. Yeah, but it just didn't go very well. I think he played at left back. I'm not certain about this, but I think part of the problem was Pietro Viekovod, who was the kind of aging stopper who'd been at Sampdoria when they won the league, was supposed to be moved on, but actually he ended up playing till he was about 74 or something ridiculous, but certainly that survived longer than they thought. So Walker was shoved out to left back, and it just wasn't. That's not where he played. And I think he was back at Sheffield Wednesday within a year, certainly within 18 months. I was never the same player also. I think there was talk of an injury as well. He, during the next season, so his first at Sampdoria, he had 2 or 3 high-profile, not even errors, but just kind of vulnerabilities with England. Overmars skinned him for a penalty in a really important World Cup qualifier against the Netherlands. It would never have happened before. And he kind of went from being one of the best centre-backs in the world, which I think he was at this point. Even at the Euro, he had an excellent Euros with England, to very quickly becoming just a good kind of Premier League, eventually Premier League centre-half, which is a shame, really. But I think if I was picking an England team for players at their peak in my lifetime, I would probably have him in. I think he really was that good, only for a short, from about 88 to 92, like I say. But yeah, I thought he was tremendous. I don't know what your memories of him are, though. He couldn't play football to save his life, by the way. I'm talking purely defensively. And that's another reason why he shouldn't be a left back, Even their left back wasn't as an attacking position as he is now. But he talks about it in this, actually, that Clark kind of wanting being encouraged across the halfway line and stuff. But yeah, that clearly wasn't his strength. He was just a brilliant one-to-one defender, really. I
remember when he did move to Italy, so much was made about his pace. It seemed as if, that was his thing. That was the one thing that he had that would, stand him apart in Italy. So, yeah, as you say, it didn't work out very well for him. But, it was a period of time because you had Gazzetta Football Attack. It was a period of time to be over in Italy, I suppose, in terms of getting...
Yeah. And actually, I think because Platt did well. Platt had been the previous season at Bari. Bari were rubbish. I think they were relegated, but he'd done pretty well. So I think that, and Gascoigne had obviously agreed to go. So I think it became more of a kind of acceptable idea for English players, because they were generally quite reluctant. After Italia 90, there were loads of examples of people who almost bought, but no one actually went. My favourite one is that Steve Bull was approached by Torino and turned them down partially because he said he misses English breakfast, which I think is tremendous. But a lot of them were like Walker, Barnes almost went, Lineker almost went, Gascoigne almost went, and eventually they did. But yeah, there was such fascination to see how they would do, because Serie A at that point was the best league in the world by a mile. Probably the strongest domestic league there's ever been, I think. So there was such fascination. It was kind of a bit sad that Walker felt like a sure thing in the way that Platt didn't. Even Gascoigne didn't, because partly because of his temperament, partly because he's a creative player, so you can, there's kind of no guarantees. With Walker, it felt like it kind of was guaranteed. He was just a brilliant defender, and then didn't work out. And it was genuinely, I remember that Overmars thing, being genuinely shocked to see him skinned by someone at a really important moment as well. And then they went to Poland and Norway, and he went with a stake in Norway, that infamous game they lost. The whole do I not like that period. But I think, I didn't realise this at the time, but I'm pretty sure I read that he got some kind of injury that did compromise his pace. Not a huge amount, but just enough to turn him from world class into kind of just a good or very good Premier League player. And in fact, when he came back, wouldn't have been that old, but he went to Sheffield Wednesday, I think. Who again were a good side, but I think it kind of told a story as to the level he was at. I'm pretty sure he played his last game for England under Graham Taylor. I don't think Venables ever looked at him, and he wouldn't have been that old at this point, maybe 30, 29. So he faded really quickly, which, yeah, kind of sad, actually. I always really liked him.
Mm-hmm. You spoke earlier on about the Marseille strip and looking at the other team. Which team is that he's up against that he's going over?
I wondered about that. I mean, my first thought was USA, but it can't be. I've got a fear. Is it fit? They played Finland just before the Euros.
Finland's a good show.
I wonder if it might be that. It has to be that period. It has to be close to the 92 Euros. So they didn't play. Yeah, it might be Finland. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean the other. I was sort of thinking of Bulgaria, but they're green and red or something, weren't they? The stripes that are on it.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking maybe a goalkeeper, but there's not got any gloves on.
Yeah, it definitely looks like an outfield kit.
Yeah, Finland's a great show.
That would be our first. I'm not certain, but they played Czechoslovakia, but I'm pretty sure Czechoslovakia were red, weren't they? And England would have played in that blue kit. Yeah, I guess I'd say Finland, but I don't know.
Yeah.
And the facing page there, they've got he'll take Italy by storm, and Paul Elliott. Paul Elliott is the only other British defender to have played in Italy. The Chelsea favourite spent 2 years at Pisa before returning to Britain in 1990. Let's get a good picture there, Elliott playing for Pisa.
Talking of kits, by the way, Serie A around this period, I mean, there's just so many glorious kits. I mean, even that Pisa one, which is fairly functional, I'd love to wear that. But around, particularly at night, there's a website somewhere that has all the 1990-91 Serie A kits. And they're just fantastic. So we did the Inter with Missoura, and obviously all the AC Milan ones, Juventus with, I think it's Upim then, Sampdoria, which we see here, which is pretty much the same kit as the one where they won the league. Yeah, I think that's probably my favourite. If I could kind of choose from one era of kits or one period of kits, one league, it'd probably be that, I think. Yeah, even the kind of mid-80s, Maradona is the obvious one. Yeah, that's so good.
All right, are we over the page? No, here we go. I'll hand over to you now, Andy.
Yep, so we're going to jump out the magazine, Rob, and we're going to do a focus on yourself. So get ready for some questions. These are the hard-hitting questions. They're not really. Full name?
Robert Allen Smyth.
What's your birthplace?
It's King's Cross in London.
Okay, what was your first car?
I've never had one, actually. I never learned to drive. I had one driving lesson and kind of quickly realised it wasn't a good idea.
Well, there we go. What car was it you had your one driving lesson in?
I can't remember. Okay. I just remember my mother's disappointment.
Is Robert first non-driver?
Andy? He might be as well. I would have to consult the archives for that one, but yeah, that's favourite player of all time.
Roy Keane.
Favourite team?
I kind of grew up supporting Man United, but I also have a soft spot for teams like Denmark, which I mentioned, and also the Sampdoria team that won the league. I've always really been fond of them.
Okay. What's the most memorable match that you've witnessed, either in person or on the telly?
It would be the FA Cup semi-final in '99 between Man United and Arsenal. The game where Giggs scored that famous goal, but it's kind of more about the whole game. It was just kind of, the best game I've ever seen, I think.
Okay. And what's been your biggest thrill in your life?
God. Professionally or personally or both?
Both. But let's go for, both, whatever.
Well, professionally, so I helped or goes through an autobiography by a cricketer called Rob Smyth, who was my hero growing up. So kind of meeting him and doing that, it was like just a huge thrill. Personally, I have no idea, probably the same.
Okay. What's been your biggest disappointment?
Crikey. I think more in terms of kind of regrets than disappointments. So regret obviously being something you're responsible for. Disappointment, I don't know. So but by coincidence, I had 2 books published in April 2014, and my mum died like a few days before both were published, which I feel like disappointment's the wrong word for your mother's death, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I kind of wish she'd been around to kind of see some of that and just celebrate it and stuff.
Yep, okay. What's the best country that you've visited?
Probably Japan. Absolutely loved it. I went there in 2015 and I'd love to go back.
Was that for work or was that for pleasure?
No, just me and my fiance went. Just amazing. I kind of find it really hard to describe, but it's like so vibrant. People are so decent. It's just kind of inspirational. It's just a better way to live, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. What was your favourite food?
I have a really kind of boring palate, so probably just the thing I kind of miss, since not being near London, is a steak restaurant called the Hawksmoor, and they have steak obviously, but with their bone marrow gravy, it's one of the best, probably the best thing in the world that I've eaten. So I kind of miss that. I
genuinely thought you were going to say steak and chips there, and I'm happy. Please say steak and chips.
Effectively it is, but it's steak and triple cooked chips with bone marrow gravy.
Okay, we'll take that one. I'll take that. Miscellaneous likes. So give me 2 things that you like to do.
Well, yeah, probably walking football. Just I don't know. Kind of older you get, I like sitting at home, kind of watching episodes of Would I Lie to You or something like that with my fiance, and just I like that kind of peace and laughter of that, I guess.
Do you do what I do and just watch the same ones over and over again?
Yeah, we've got to the point where now we say, the kind of rule is anything with Bob Mortimer, and you can watch it as many times as you like. Yeah. Any of the others, we've kind of got a rule, maybe 4 or 5 times is enough. But Bob Mortimer's ones you can just could watch them forever, really. Absolutely,
love them. Miscellaneous dislikes. So give me a couple of things that drives you up the wall that you don't like.
I get probably disproportionately annoyed by kind of internet comments and more kind of extreme stuff there, Twitter and everything else. I don't know what else really. I get sometimes the more kind of hysterical sports coverage gets on my nerves, probably more than it should. Like stuff like transfer deadline day, things like that. I should probably just let it go. It's not for me. It was never for me. That's fine. I should let it go, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, favorite TV show of all time?
Sopranos. Okay. That's kind of like a lot of people, I guess, mildly obsessive about that. Could just watch that on loop for the rest of my life.
Yep, great shout. Favorite singers, or you can have 2 singers or bands?
Yeah, I don't know. It kind of changes so often. Like, so when I was younger, I used to be absolutely love Radiohead and listen to them, and I still do. But I actually I thought about this, and I looked at the most played songs on my iTunes, and it's what was it? It was Sister Saviour by The Rapture, which surprised me a bit because I like them, but I don't like them that much. And then it was I can't remember the others. Just all like I did kind of recently. This is a bit bad. I've recently discovered the Associates, which is a ridiculous thing to say, but I kind of, I was too young at the time to really. I kind of listen to them a lot at the moment, and fascinated by Billy Mackenzie, but I wouldn't say I have a particular favourite really.
Okay. You know that wee story about Billy Mackenzie when he got dropped by his record label?
Vaguely, I'm in nowhere an expert.
He was in the office and he get told he was being dropped by his record label. So he was like, fair enough. So he's like, can I get a taxi home on account? And they were like, yeah, sure. So obviously this is his big record label in London. And he gets a taxi and it's like, wait, Dundee. And he got a driver to drive him on the account all the way from London. He didn't do it.
Fantastic. There's a book I keep meaning to try and get hold of actually about his life, but I stumbled. I kind of knew I'd heard of them. I'd heard Party Fears too, but I only stumbled across them when there was a program on BBC Scotland a couple of years ago. What was it called? I forget. It was an 8-part series anyway about Scottish music from about.
I'll Rip It Up.
That's exactly it. Yeah, which I always go back to. It's on the plan. That's it. I thought it was fantastic. I mean, some of the stuff I knew, like Mogwai Orange Juice, but less familiar with some of the other stuff. It was really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just love White Car in Germany, which I don't think I'd ever heard. Became mildly obsessed with. Sort of incredible,
right.
Particularly for that period of time. I just thought, how could we be doing that in the late 70s? But
yeah. I think there's a couple of Billy Mackenzie documentaries on YouTube.
Yeah, I watched one actually around that time. I forget what it's called, but I keep meaning to try and get hold of the book as well that some guy had done on him.
Yeah.
See, but when you're talking about Radiohead there, because they're one of my favourites, and the thing that always gets me when I tell people that, the ones that say, oh, but they're really depressing. Now, I've never listened to Radiohead and felt depressed.
I agree. Even the more kind of melancholy stuff, I just find it more beautiful than anything.
Yeah.
There's that famous Father Ted sketch, isn't there, when he's on the bus and he's suicidal and exit music comes on. But particularly since kind of post OK Computer, it's not really. I'm not even sure you can make that argument, can you?
Yeah.
So they're depressing. I mean, the odd song, they're kind of beautiful piano song. But again, I don't think it was depressing. I think it was more beautiful than anything.
Okay, moving on to favourite actors. So, a couple of actors. And after you get to see a shot at Glory, one of them will obviously be McCoy.
Alexander McCoy. And I don't know, I feel like everything goes back to The Sopranos, really. Just probably watch it more than anything. So I would think of Gandolfini and Edie Falco. But I really like Mark Bonner as well. I absolutely loved Guilt when I saw that. And he's someone as well I wasn't that familiar with till I saw him, I think, in Line of Duty. But since then, I've seen him in things like Shetland and
Yeah.
he did his own thing recently, like a documentary where he grew up, which I thought was brilliant. So yeah, I like him. But yeah, probably, you know, most of the Sopranos, like Gandolfini. Michael Imperioli, I've always been kind of fascinated by. I found it really interesting. Yeah, that lot, I guess.
Yeah, there's a period where Matt Bonner just started to appear everywhere, you know, and he became,
Yeah.
oh, there's that guy again. Oh, there's that guy too. Oh,
Yeah.
know who he is. That's Matt Bonner. You know?
But also, he tends to be a really good kind of guarantee of quality, I think. There may be exceptions that you know that I don't, but yeah, everything I've watched with him has been really, really good quality.
Yeah. Yeah, we had Neil Forsyth on a while ago who wrote.
Oh, yeah. He wrote good. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I absolutely love it. I still haven't watched series 2, actually. I've got it on the planet. I must find time to watch. So yeah, I thought the first one was brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay, question. Who's your best friend?
It would be my fiance Jay, I think. But my best kind of male friend would be a guy I went to school with called Gavin Monks, who I'm still in touch with. So yeah, those two.
Okay. Who's been the biggest influence on you?
Probably on my mum, but professionally, a guy called Tim Delisle, who was like kind of the person who inadvertently got me into journalism by putting a kind of note in the editor's notes for Cricket Mag asking for people to see work experience. And then I got to work under him for a while, and but it was a perfect time. It was really early in my career. I learned so many good habits. He's a genius, the best editor I've worked under by a mile. So he writes about cricket mainly, a little bit of football as well. But yeah, I would say him professionally, definitely.
Okay. And final question, which person in the world would you most like to meet?
I was going to say Roy Keane, but I just think I'd be shitting myself. So maybe I do really like Michael Imperioli, the guy who played Christopher in The Sopranos. I listen to his podcast, and I'm really interested. He's does a lot of meditation and Buddhism, which I'm not really kind of more inquisitive about than anything, but I find it really interesting. So yeah, I'd probably say him.
Okay.
And he just seems really sound as well.
Brilliant. That was the last of the questions. Over to you, Tom.
I'm glad about that.
Well, I was going to ask you, Rob, about one of the many things you're involved with is the Guardian's newsletter, the Fiver. I was just going to ask, because the Fivers gets a language all of its own. Were you part of the sort of creation of it? And is there a certain type of writer that writes for the Fiver?
I certainly wasn't part of the creation. So the main credit for that, there were a few people. Paul McInnes, Sean Ingle worked there. This is before my time. But I think it's mainly Scott Murray, who is the biggest genius I've worked with, certainly in terms of funny sports writing. So he, I think, developed the language for that and for the minute-by-minute stuff that was kind of so good and so robust isn't quite the right word, but I can't think of a better one. That it was kind of passed down without being passed down. You know, I don't think I've ever been in a meeting where people have spoken about how to write the Fiver, how to write a live blog. But I think he not just him, but he was the leader, I think. Created something so strong that kind of people kind of just picked it up almost through osmosis, you know. So I remember, the first day I worked at the Guardian, big asked to do it. And I was kind of terrified but you just kind of, I don't know, you get more used to it. I'm just being in that environment, you kind of pick it up. It's really interesting that it's been going on nearly kind of 20 years now. It just seems to be doing pretty well. But yeah, I genuinely think it's a testament to his genius. A lot of that website, actually, the tone was, I mean, obviously things evolve and things change and the world changes, particularly with, you know, things are less kind of frivolous now and things like that. But I do think the essential tone is the same, and that's because what he created was so strong that people just pick it up. I genuinely can't remember being in a meeting where people spoken about. Obviously, there'd be times when people would say this didn't work, this did work, but generally people are just left to kind of do it through what they've learned from reading it. It definitely. So I first did it in 2004, and by then it'd been going at least, I think, 3-4 years. Scott Murray is like he should be a consultant to kind of every sports journalism website in the world. Really, he's that good, I think. But yeah, it's definitely his work.
The other thing I'm just going to ask you about was Kaiser. How did you come across that story?
So that, yeah, I mean, I got quite lucky with that, really. They, the people who were doing a film on it, they were looking for someone to write a book to go with it, and they approached, among other people, Donald McRae, who's a famous interviewer with The Guardian, and he was working on something else at the time and couldn't do it. I think it might be Stephen Gerrard's autobiography, and he suggested they get in touch with me, so I got really lucky with that. And then I met him. That was so strange, and kind of still is, actually. I'm still, even, what's it now, I've had 5-6 years on, I still haven't a clue of half of what is true and what isn't. It was really weird. I mean, that, talk about thrill, also, that, like a couple of trips to Brazil, you think that kind of shouldn't happen to people like me, and that was great. But it was also, there was a really fun time, actually, on the second trip when we were almost doing, it's the closest I've ever got to being a private detective, kind of trying to track down people and work out what happened, what didn't, and because it was so confusing. But yeah, that's how it came about, really. It was originally just through the people who did the film, which I would absolutely recommend to anyone. It's so good, it's so well put together. They wanted a book to go with it, so that's how I got involved. But I wasn't involved at the start. I didn't kind of discover or anything. I remember hearing about it, kind of like anyone, really. You kind of think it can't possibly be true, and then you kind of, the more deeper you get, you think, well, actually, some of this clearly is true, but you don't know exactly what is, what isn't. It's a unique story, I guess.
Yeah.
But a lot of it, the strange thing is, with some parts clearly, some of the stories clearly are complete fabrication, but a hell of a lot of them are true. They just are. The fact that even the when the people who did the film, they spoke to people like Pepetta and Zico and everyone else, and they all knew about Kaiser and all told stories about Kaiser. Renato Gaúcho and Ricardo Rocha and people like that, people who won the World Cup. It clearly, a lot of it happened. I have no idea how or why, but it did.
Right, so back to the magazine. So now we're onto the letters page, and it's Greavesy, and got a good picture of Greavesy there reading some of the letters. So this week's star letter comes from John Mallon of Lodge Street, Willenhall, West Midlands, and he wins a pair of Mizuno Europe TP boots. And it's Don't Forget the Fans. Alex Ferguson moans that the new TV deal has ignored the most important people in football, namely the players and managers. Rubbish. The most important people in football are the supporters, which we know now is absolutely no true. But Greavesy says, absolutely right. Professional football only exists because people pay to watch the game and the players receive a percentage of the gate. If there are no supporters, those players soon become amateurs. The fans are the most important people in football, but this new deal has totally ignored them. The chairman have taken a very short-sighted view because they expect fans to cough up £300 for a satellite dish and pay increased admission charges at the turnstiles. The punters' wishes have been overlooked for 25 years now, and the day is rapidly approaching when even the most fervent supporter says asterisk, asterisk, asterisk to football.
I think getting a bit recent, I think we've just seen that this is still the case, that for some football clubs, it's not about the fans. And of course, I'm referring to Wraith Rovers. I don't want to get into too much on here. But that's just an example of totally ignoring the fans. So it's been going on for, when was this, 92? So 30 years, 40 years, 30 years, I can't count. No.
30 years. Yeah, 30 years. Yeah. You know, I think you get to a certain age, I'm the same, and you realise you start to lose perspective. So I'll often look back and think, it was 23 years ago today, in 1989. I think, no, that's not right. Yeah, that happens loads to me now. Yeah. But you're right. It's so interesting looking. One of the things I love doing is looking at newspaper archives for research, but the amount of times you come across an issue you think is a recent concern, like, you know, you find something in 1939 talking about players are earning too much or whatever. Yeah. And it's almost like depressing. You think, you feel like these are new valid concerns and we're right to be really irate about them, but actually it's been going around forever. I know, obviously, I guess it accelerates a bit more, but yeah, even this, I mean, this is certainly, what was it, Brian Glanville in World Soccer used to always call it the greatest good league, the Premier League. And it's completely right. I think at the time, as a kind of naive 16-year-old, I didn't really see it that way, just probably drank the Kool-Aid a little bit. Then you kind of realise over time that, yeah, That's exactly what it was about. It was about just money and the land grab a bit. But actually, one thing, Fergie's very critical at the start of this era about the Premier League. He wrote a book in '92 called 6 Years at United. And there's a bit in that as well, and actually does talk about the fans being sold down the river. And famously, I think United's their first Premier League game was away at Southampton on a Monday night, which isn't, the easiest train journey home. So he did talk about it in that, but yeah, it sounds like at this point he was more concerned about the impact on the players and himself. So
any other letters we've picked out off these 2 pages?
Yeah, just the Italian mob stood out a bit. I keep reading how the Italian league is the best in the world. Every time I see the games, all the players said be diving, arguably cheating, says Graham Locke from Hornchurch in Essex. And Greasy says, AC Milan are probably the best team in the world, and occasionally you see an exceptional piece of skill. But overall, English fans wouldn't tolerate Italian football. It's highly negative, produces few goals, and it's frustrating to watch. In terms of entertainment, our league is still the best in the world. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure about that, to be honest. I think Serie A was incredible around that time. But it's just interesting that really was the attitude at the time. But, diving and cheating was a foreign thing and didn't happen over here. And I know there's an element of that, more foreign players, the more normal it became. But you can go back 20 years to Francis Lee winning 15 penalties in a year or whatever it was for Man City. But also, I don't buy that you see an occasional piece of skill. I mean, Serie A around that time I thought was fantastic. I used to absolutely love watching it. I remember they used to be almost tucked away on Sky Sports because they obviously didn't have Premier League then. But yeah, I don't know about you, but I thought it was fantastic.
Do you know? I think Greavesy had an axe to grind with Italy.
That's a really good point.
Because I've seen loads. I mean, it's not as if he puts the boot into a lot of things, but he's put the Italian football down quite a lot over the years in this. And yeah, I think it's based on his experience of playing there and not succeeding.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. I think that's an excellent point. Yeah.
So the one I've picked out is not for crosses. Too many players waste potentially promising situations by hitting their crosses too high, too long, or simply behind the goal. One of my pet hates. In fact, when I was watching the Edinburgh Derby just last night, it was like there was a few examples of it, and it's like they just want to hit the ball in a sort of Ronaldo type way into the box, or David Beckham. They want to, the ball to do the movement and things. Just put it into the ball, put it into the area.
Yeah.
And I think they focus too much on making the ball difficult to defend rather than putting it in and letting the attackers make it difficult for the defenders. So once again, something back then it's like, oh, this is a problem, and today it's exactly the same thing. As much as technically, you could argue that the players are better nowadays, the balls are maybe a factor, but it's the same thing. They just overhit it. Things that they do in training day after day, they just can't do when they're under the pressure of an actual game. So that's the one I picked out from that.
And I know there's one about the back pass rule there as well. We're going to look at that in a wee bit more detail in a minute, I think.
Also, sorry, Tom, the Robert Fleck, is that the kit you were talking about, the Norwich kit?
Yeah, it is actually, yeah. Although it looks like it's got more stripes down the right, or his left-hand side, our right as we look at it.
Yeah.
What I'm thinking of, I think, has only got them on his right side. Right. But yeah, it's essentially that.
Yeah.
Actually, that's interesting. I don't remember it being different, but yeah, that looks slightly different. But it's kind of very similar to the one I was thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, Tom.
So yeah, just down that the right hand side panel, there's latest videos from Spurs. So this is kind of era when teams were starting to put out sort of end of season videos kind of thing. So there's 2 videos with Gary Lineker out on the front there. There's one called Goals of the Season, 91-92, and another one called Lineker, Simply the Best, the world's #1 striker, £12.99 plus post and packaging each.
Yeah, I've mentioned a few times about how, Spurs were one of the teams who were doing the merchandise to quite an extensive degree before others. I mean, they were including brochures in the Shoot magazine, you know, like 20 pages worth of, you can imagine the sort of tat that was in a 20-page football merchandise magazine. You know, jewellery, babies' bibs, things like that. But Spurs were always one of these teams who were sort of ahead of the curve on that. So it's no surprise to see them there.
Did you have any football videos, Rob?
Yeah, I used to love all that, particularly around the kind of late 80s, early 90s. I think it might be Chrysalis, a company who did all the ones for the top flight English teams. So they would have their end of season video, then they'd have goals galore and saves galore and race for the championship. I think they went from 88 to 92. So I used to love those. And then just, you get random ones, like Soccer Superstars in the 80s, where you'd have like 3 goals from Frank Stapleton and then 3 goals from, I don't know, Mark Hughes or Liam Brady or whatever. Yeah, I used to absolutely love all that stuff. And then I think when Serie A took off on Channel 4, they had a load as well. Do you remember Italia 90? They kind of really milked that. There was kind of England's glory, Gazza's glory, then the kind of review of the whole tournament and everything else. The one thing that always struck me about those is how incongruous it was when you had commentary that was clearly dubbed on after. It's probably overly nerdy, but I couldn't enjoy it. I just knew that wasn't the real commentary. Particularly when you had the same commentator who'd done it live, and you kind of knew it because it was in your head. But then they would have to, for rights reasons, they'd do it again, and they'd almost do a tribute act to it. So they'd use part of the same commentary, but not. And it made me realize commentary is such an integral part of a memory of it, not from when you watch it, but from when you watch it back again and again and again. So then when it would come on, because I used to love all those homemade videos, you know. I've still got one somewhere of Euro 92 actually, just all the goals and the BBC and stuff. Yeah, so absolutely, I was just lap that stuff up.
Right, okay, so over the page again then. So this is Platty's Grey 8. So this is David Platt picking out players from Euro 92. Some great names there, can't really argue with. Does anyone want to pick out any of the players that he's chosen?
You're right. Most of them are world-class players, but it's interesting. Towards the end, you kind of feel like he's struggling a bit, and you almost feel like he's just said to his ghostwriter, just put anything for this guy. so you start with Gary Lineker, Marco van Basten, Jean-Pierre Papin, Thomas Brolin, and they're all really kind of precise tributes, quite detailed and quite smart. Ali McCoist also. Then he gets to Ben Christensen, Denmark. I didn't know Christian played, to be honest. I always think of Poulsen and Laudrup, but it's just kind of, I didn't know much about him before the game against the Danes, blah, blah, blah. And he's just kind of rambling. Igor Kolivanov, likewise, for the CIS. Then Rudy Voller for Germany, who was a great player. But yeah, those two kind of stood out, Christensen and Kolivanov, because you could imagine a conversation. Yeah, just put anything for those. But it also shows the quality of forward, you know. The fact Papin went to Milan, could barely get a game, obviously because of Van Basten, but I mean, there were some amazing forwards around. So Brolin has obviously become a joke in England in particular, which I always think is a bit harsh because certainly before he went to Leeds around 1992 and 94 in particular, when they got to the semis, just a brilliant player, fantastic player. I don't really think the rest are goal scorers really, whereas Brolin you think of more as a kind of number 10, but still a fantastic footballer,
Yeah, so had his day against England in this tournament, didn't he?
Yeah, amazing goal, wasn't it? That game was interesting because in the end you couldn't argue. England were kind of well beaten 2-1, but it was a game that kind of either both teams had to win, or maybe Sweden could have drawn. I forget. England had to win anyway. But actually they were 1-0 up at half time and played really well. Platt had scored and admittedly got a lucky goal, mishit it, but then they missed 2 or 3 really good chances. Tony Daly in particular was one of Taylor's wild cards. So it's, like I said earlier, it's really interesting. England are remembered as an absolute shambles at this tournament, partially with good reason. And yet, if they take one of those chances and go 2-0 up, they'll probably go through to the semi-finals of the Euros, which they hardly ever get to, certainly outside England. Fine margins and all that. But it was the winning goal is beautiful, isn't it? Brolin, Darlene, Brolin 1-2, and then that kind of flipped finish past Chris Wood is so good.
Yeah.
And again, with this double page, we spoke about it right from the start. It's a lot of filler on the page, a lot of gaps, a lot of not a great deal of text, and that's, you know, again, I come back to it. The amount of information in articles and text in this magazine, this particular, isn't great, and again, it's showing there that, you know, Rudy Voller's got the least amount of text, and, and you think, you know, you could at least get to the bottom of the page for each person, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Voller in particular, I'd love to know kind of the whole process, how that came about. Because you're right, it feels like a 5-minute chat that someone's had to work very hard to turn into a double page spread, but who knows?
I mean, I think so. What's on there probably could have been done before the tournament, really. I don't know that they got much.
Exactly. I suspect it's to do with the fact they don't know, but by the time the magazine comes out, the semi-finalists have decided, so they're kind of trying to cover all bases. I don't know.
All right, we'll move on. I'm aware of time, so we'll kind of maybe sort of breeze through some of this. So we'll not linger too long on the history of the European Championship. But this is obviously a multiple part series. This is part 6, Magnifique Michel, where it looks at the 1984 tournament. And
sorry, Tom. You say part 6, but it actually does say part V1.
Part V1. Yeah, part 6. And another advert, El Primo del Mundo. This is Adidas football boots. Get into the boot, the world's best shoes. Get into the boot, the world's best shoes. And it's only $49.99.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about these. They don't look like. I love reds. I've got something about red studs, red nylon studs, and I think it harks back to the '78 World Cup boots, which just with the red studs look magnificent. But I don't know that I like. So it's got the 3 stripes down the side, white stripes for Adidas, but there's a black. It's cut with a black stripe all the way through it as well, so it's not 3 continuous white stripes. And I don't know that I mean, it's just the aesthetics of it, isn't it? But I don't know that works for me.
No, I agree. When I first looked at it, you kind of noticed Adidas or Adidas, but I wasn't entirely certain because of the way it folded round, and there was a break in between, so you had to kind of, and there's no obviously on the tongue either. So yeah, I wasn't entirely sure. I liked it.
A lot of technical details in that advert as well, about the studs and various things as well. And they're telling you it's reduced from $89.99.
Yeah, maybe that's telling you something.
Well, I mean that's what you pay roughly that, maybe a bit more for a pair of World Cup, you know, Adidas World Cup, or what's the other ones? I can't remember the other Adidas ones, but that's roughly what you would pay nowadays. So you can imagine what 90 quid was worth back then. That's. Yeah, stick to the Woolworths.
Right, okay, going over again. So, will we skip over Ray of the Rangers?
We can do, but I tweeted this out today to both Tony Husband and Steve McGarry, who are the owners of this feature. I mean, we've had Steve McGarry on before, and he spoke about how he started this one, Ray of the Rangers, and then he had other stuff to do, really, so he brought Tony Husband on board to sort of take over. You know, it's, you know what I'm like with it when it comes to comic stuff in the magazines, but I quite like this, so maybe I'm just biased because, you know, I think Steve McGarry is a god, so there we go. Even though it's probably Tony Husband's work. He's also a god if you're listening to this, Tony.
And the facing page, it's a competition. Win a signed England football plus enough Mars bars to keep Gaza happy.
Unbelievable.
Actually, they're very happy. Paul Gascoigne, probably during the 1990 World Cup. And is that Danny Baker with the England?
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. I think it is, but I don't know what the
context is. So the competition is you have to name all the England players in the photo. And I think it was taken at a the filming of an advert for Mars. So that's the context of that. But that's a competition. Name all the England players. I think there's 10 of them, and then win 48 Mars bars. It's just the idea of the strap line is enough Mars bars to keep guys happy.
Yeah.
But it was that period where it was, I wouldn't say acceptable, but it wasn't unacceptable to have a dodgy diet and still be a professional footballer as long as you had the ability.
Yeah.
All right, going over the page again here. So this is my feature on Roy Wegerle. And Wright said, "Roy, I'm too tricky for England," which was a pun on a popular band and popular hit of around about that time.
Yeah, it's a stretch, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wright said, "Fred, I'm too sexy." Yeah, it's a stretch, but also because it's about a year since that song was in the charts, so it's a bit of a stretch. But anyway.
Well, they're going on the other page to another sort of the Wild Rover as well, so that they're going for all the old song puns, aren't they?
And then they've used the same photograph of him 5 times.
Yeah. I didn't notice the other page. So on the left-hand page, this is a big bugbear of mine, is people stretching, skewing photographs. So this one is a photograph of Roy Wegerle up against Ray Houghton.
Yeah.
And they've basically used a third of the page, but they've changed the height and not kept the width at the same perspective. So it looks really, really unprofessional. I wouldn't even say unprofessional. It's just wrong. I mean, if I saw this done in a school magazine or a football club programme, for example, Tom, then I would absolutely say the same thing. So it's just, it's really bad form for me. But I never noticed the 3 on the other side in the same way that they had the 3 England badges. They've got the 3 pictures as well. So yeah, you're spot on. They're using that photograph 5 times over 2 pages.
What do you think of Wegerle's shorts? I guess that's a US. Yeah, I quite like them actually. I've never seen those, which is the whole 3-stripe Adidas, I guess.
Yeah, I don't mind that at all. But Roy Wegerle, was he not like? Was there not talk of him also playing for Scotland as well? Was that not right?
Yeah, doesn't it say he was eligible for about 8 different countries for various reasons?
Oh yeah, it's got Scotland down there as well. His mother's birthplace.
Yeah, but it's interesting. So the article's about him choosing America and not being part of the England squad, but it said he got as far as a B squad call-up. Instead, he opted to play for the US, birthplace of his wife Marie. Now, I don't know. I know the qualification for countries is pretty, patchy at times, but I don't know if you can play for the country that your wife. So I guess that's just an aside and not actually the reason why he qualified to play for America. What do you make of the Blackburn Rovers shirt he's in there? I mean, obviously it's a traditional sort of half and half, white and blue, but
it was like a slightly lighter blue than usual.
Lighter blue, yeah.
And obviously McEwen stands out as well, McEwen's lager, but it's a decent kit. So he would have been part of their team right at the start of the whole Premier League era, wouldn't he? I don't think he was there by the time they won the league, but yeah. I guess Shearer kind of blew everyone away, all the other forwards who were there.
And down below that, again, we've got another Adidas advert. So, again, football boots that look much like the ones that we've seen. Adidas Etrusco Unico.
Oh, it's the same ones. It's exactly the same ones, yeah.
They're now $39.99.
Yeah. If you just keep reading on, they'll be $29.99 in a couple of pages.
They're a tenner cheaper. Yeah. A quite horrific tracksuit. It's black and with green and purple and white flashes. Very looking as well.
That's not a footballer, is it? Is he just some random?
Yeah, I think so.
Random guy.
All right. So over the page again, we'll kind of skim over this. This is a big double page on Richard Gough, born in Sweden, raised in South Africa, but Gough insists, "I'm proud to be a Scotsman." So we spoke about Richard Gough before, and again another picture of him, a commanding header with the elbow for balance. Anything to say about these 2 pages?
I'm just it goes through his 5 goals. Is it? Oh no, 6 goals for Scotland at that point, and 2 of them against Cyprus, which are obviously quite memorable for Scottish fans who were around at that sort of time. That it was.
He scored the winner inside, and it was in about 6 minutes at injury time, which at the time was quite excessive. And of course, to not beat Cyprus was an embarrassment at the time. But I scored the winner late on.
And one of those times that you actually got to watch an international football game whilst in school, where they wheeled in the TV. So that was, that made it doubly memorable for that.
Yeah, and of course the famous goal he scored against England as well in 1985. Yep. All right, okay. So moving over to Shoot Mart. Any adverts you want to pick out here, Rob?
Well, the one that stood out, it's probably too late now, is Build Muscles Fast. Muscle and fitness, where you forgot about all these strange little adverts. I can't even see beyond that, to be honest, but it's just a drawing of some guy looking like Rambo flexing his muscles. You think, like, how does that work in a football magazine? And then it's just sort of Play by Mail. I know you've spoken about that before. Even there's a Pen Pals one, isn't there? What's it say? Pen Pals mag for lonely people. Approved copy from Matchmaker, Chorley, Lancashire. I mean, I have no idea what that entails, but and then Jokes Free as well. There's a joke catalogue, Britain's #1 jokes catalogue, mixed with over 800 practical jokes from 20p. It's a completely different world, isn't it? I don't know what the modern equivalent of this is. I guess there isn't one.
Well, I mean, you would see this in Viz nowadays, wouldn't you? That's where you would see a page that looks like
that's
this.
True.
But the muscles one that you point out there, that's been in every single magazine that I've seen from the late 50s, and it's probably the same drawing that's in it as well.
So what are you supposed to do? What does that actually
It'll probably be a bull worker, that you press in.
Oh, yeah.
It's probably trying to sell one of those. The one I want to point out is that football trivia quiz down the bottom in the middle. And it's the bottom of that. It says naughty trivia quiz. And it says, I'm going to try, test your sexuologicality. Sexuologicality. I mean, is that even a word?
It is now, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't think it is, though.
I mean, it's like they've just thrown 3 different words there together and say, aye, that'll do. But that's the one from there. As you say, the Play by Mail, there's a Soccer Supremos 3 and the Football Director, which was, brilliant.
And we had the Rangers shop, 3 different locations in Glasgow. At Ibrox, then Trongate and St Vincent Street as well. All right, move on. So here we go. So this is a 2-page spread. Cut it out. Soccer reacts as FIFA outlaws the back pass. Now, so to ask a number of players for their opinion on the new back pass law, and just go over some of the people they've asked. Jerry Craney, Celtic striker, Bruce Grobbelaar, the Liverpool goalkeeper, Roger Milford, referee, Ken Monkow, Chelsea defender, Neville Southall, Everton goalkeeper, Lawrence Batty, the Woking goalkeeper. Any reason why you think they've asked the Woking goalkeeper for his opinion?
I don't, but his quotes are fantastic. He says it also means goalies will have to work on outfield skills to dribble their way out of trouble. Those with a good touch, like me, will be all right, but others are elephants away from the goal, and there are going to be some comical scenes as everyone tries to get used to it. I mean, I looked him up in the hope he, ended up becoming an outfield player, scored 50 goals a season in some far-flung country, but it looks like he stayed as a keeper and then became a goalkeeping coach. I don't know whether that's tongue-in-cheek or not, but either way, it's quite entertaining. And I thought it was interesting also that Ken Monkow said about at least there won't be any repeat. It was a tremendous own goal I scored when we played Scarborough in the League Cup a couple of years ago when I tried a back pass from the halfway line. I think at that stage there was so much kind of confusion and panic. People thought that players wouldn't pass the ball back, even though you still could, and obviously the goalkeepers clear it, or as they do now, just control it and play it out. There was like such a moral panic. It was like at the end of I remember that. I'd love to know my own logic, but I remember at the time thinking it was an outrage. This can't happen. This is wrong. In fact, as I think you said before, it's one of the best things happened to football in our lifetime.
Yep.
But at the time, there was so much of a panic and an outrage. I think, like anything, I guess, like shocker than you and all that. But yeah, it turned out. I think it took a few months to settle down, didn't it? I always remember the Serie A scores being absolutely hilarious at the time because it was the best league in the world, but it was still pretty defensive and quite low scoring. And the first few weeks, you'd have like a 7-3 and a 5-4 and a 4-all, 3-all, and it was clearly blind panic. It's kind of the greatest tool they had was taken away from them. And then it kind of settles down as you get into November and December. But yeah, it's just interesting to get the range of opinions. I don't know how you felt at the time, but I vividly remember thinking it was a really poor decision, and I was glad to say I was completely wrong.
I was still playing, I mean, I was only in my early 20s, but I remember just thinking, well, it's a rule change, I just have to deal with it. And I don't know that I thought anything bad about it. I mean, obviously, when anybody who wasn't around or can remember football back then, and when they see, the big match or even highlights from the World Cups and that, and they see players just passing right back to the goalkeeper, and they're like, what are they doing? What are they doing?
Yeah,
They can't.
The keeper always pats it forward, doesn't he?
Yeah.
So he's not picking it up, so therefore he's not eating into his however many seconds it was.
And it just, with that hindsight, it's like, why on earth was that allowed? Or obviously the game developed into that. It must have been okay at some point. I don't remember it being that bad, and then suddenly it was a tactical thing, which just killed the game.
But I suppose as football generally became more cynical in a lot of ways, it became, I mean, that's the easiest way, isn't it? If you think now, if you wanted to, the equivalent of obviously keeping by the corner flag, you could just kill 10 minutes of a game so easily if you were allowed to pass ball back and pick it up. And so, yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely essential, really, and it's changed the way football has developed. But you're right, actually, it's a really fertile period for football improving. The tackle from behind being outlawed eventually, and obviously it all stems back to Italia 90. But yeah, a lot of what we watch now, the kind of best stuff we watch now, you can trace back to this, I think. Even down to things like the way Man City play, or the way Barcelona played, or Liverpool. I think it takes time for everything to kind of have its full impact, but I think you can definitely trace a link between them.
Yeah. The one thing and it's goalkeeper related again, the one thing I really want, and I don't know how we do it, but this idea, this way that goalkeepers, when they get the ball and they catch it and then they fall forward, what I mean, and it's as if, and it's again, it's blatant time wasting, and that, that's part of the reason why this rule was introduced, was to get that out of the game. And I think that's going to be one of the things. Maybe it doesn't annoy other people as much as it annoys me, but that's one of the things that just drives me mad with the game at the moment. It's like, just get up. I hate it.
Yeah, but there's always these wee things that they use, like when they changed the rule about goal kicks. When the ball went past the left-hand side of the post, you had to take it from the left-hand side, and then they changed that to make the game quicker. Just take it from any side, but now goalkeepers just use that to waste time. They'll pick the ball up for the left-hand side and then go over to the right to take the goal kick. They'll always find a way to use it to waste time, or when it was brought in, to speed things up. Just how we look at some of the comments. Bruce Grobbler. Every year they come up with a new rule, and it's always one that affects goalkeepers. It's a specialised position, and we're getting hemmed in. How about making one that affects everyone else for a change? I used to be able to catch the ball, dribble it, and play basketball before getting rid of it. Then came the 4-step rule and the 4-second rule, forcing us to get rid of the ball quickly. Next thing, we'll be restricted to the 6-yard box alone, and they'll want to make the goals bigger. Yeah, so Bruce Grobbler was always one of those players, one of those goalkeepers who would get caught out trying to dribble out for the box or do something crazy.
I think the Peter Shreves one was probably the most constructive and the best one for me, because he's saying, when I was a youth coach at Spurs, we did that in practice games. That was the rule. and to encourage defenders to actually take control of a situation and not just rely on passing it back to the goalkeeper. So, forward thinking from there, and he was showing. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, didn't you have an episode where you found Coventry were talking about in Central League game, reserve games, not playing back passes at all, which I thought was really interesting. I've not heard that at all before.
Yeah.
And that would have been like 10 years before this, I think.
Yeah, it was, It was. Peter Shilton, who was then the Plymouth player manager, I made a similar suggestion 5 years ago, and I'm glad to see a change, but they have made one mistake. The back pass should be allowed inside the penalty area, but it takes a bit of skill to knock the ball back to the keeper. After all, the whole point is to prevent time wasting with back passes from 40 yards. Sometimes changes are made that aren't in the best interest of the game. They never seem to talk to the players about them.
Do you know, I can sort of see his logic a wee bit with that, and that the issue was mainly from outside the box, but it really has made the game better. The fact that you can't pass back from anywhere.
There's no downside, is there? You still even get the kind of comedy back passes to go wrong. There's no downside to it as far as I can see.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Let's move on then. We're getting close to the end of the magazine now. So over the page again, some more adverts. More adverts. This is Adidas coaching. Coerver coach, the world's #1 soccer teaching method. Is this something you were aware of, Andy? You were talking about.
Well, we've spoke about this a few times, and we've discussed this. And Gordon Smart, if you remember, was actually a coach on these courses when he was in London. So he was talking about that, how he knew Charlie Cook. I don't know, I'm assuming he knew Alfred Gillerstein as well. But yeah, we spoke about that in some detail before, and then again when Gordon came on. So yeah, I didn't know Dale Gordon was involved in it, but I guess it's the sort of thing that, through the years they got more players involved just to increase the reach and the status of it.
Hey Rob, did you ever go on any coaching courses?
No, I'd love to say I was at Bobby Charlton Soccer School with David Beckham, but no, nothing like that. Yeah, it's interesting seeing this. I kind of forgotten all about these little kind of clips, and it all looks fairly basic now, try and miss the first man or whatever. But actually, I guess when you're a teenager, all this stuff genuinely is quite valuable. It's stuff you don't really specifically think about. So, yeah, it's all good.
Yeah, totally. And there's pictures there of Dale Gordon coaching on the Ibrox pitch as well.
And actually, I quite like the talking about tops, the Adidas top that the picture at the bottom, the lad on the right is wearing. It's kind of a mishmash of all the various Adidas things going on at that point. So you've got the stripes over the shoulder, you've also got the classic logo. Yeah, I quite like that.
Yeah.
All right. And then getting to the end of the magazine, left-hand side of the page, Currell's Main Road Pledge, I'll never quit City. Keith Currell, who we saw earlier on in England kit. This is him in his Manchester City strip. Hitting out against the rumour mongers who are out to wreck his main road love affair. They'd have to kick me out first, he insists.
I mean, how many times do we hear that from players? I'll never leave the club.
Yeah. Spoiler alert, 3 months later, yeah. No, in that case, I think he stayed for quite a while, but you're right. It's those kind of stories are so common.
And Shoot mentioned that from England's base in Sweden, the former Wimbledon skipper told Shoot. So just getting in that they were speaking to him.
Yeah.
And over there next week, so we'll have all the agony and the ecstasy, all the action and all the verdicts taken from this Sunday's Stockholm semi-final. And I've managed to get a picture of a disconsolate Chris Waddle away from missing that.
They're not holding out much hope at this point, are they? Yeah. You think let's have an England celebration at this one?
Over the page again, so we've got Chief Executive of the FA's new Premier League, Rick Parry, and he's facing questions from shoot readers. Rob, have you picked out any questions that Rick Parry's answered to you?
Yeah, probably just a bit where it's kind of an obvious broken promise where he says there's no way we'll ask a team to play on Monday and Wednesday. What happened the season before this? Man United, they hadn't lost the league because of it, but they played 4 games in 7 days and lost 3 of them. No, hang on. 4 games, 7 days and lost 2 of them. But anyway, it cost them the league. But it arguably didn't cost them the league, so we're going to collapse anyway. So the whole idea, one of the selling points of the Premier League was this will never happen again. And of course, it did happen again. So yeah, that kind of stood out a little bit. And just all the kind of stuff, same with all these things, the kind of rhetoric that's never kind of followed through on, international football being the priority and everything else. You're looking at it now, we're kind of 30 years distant, and it just, so much of it looks just really hollow. And you wonder at the time in his head how honest he was being. I suspect he genuinely thought these things will never happen again. But then as time goes on, you kind of compromise, and you compromise a bit more, and you compromise a bit more. But yeah, I felt a bit kind of sad reading it in a way, because I remembered the kind of goodwill towards Premier League generally, not everywhere, but the kind of optimism around it. And you think actually it's just, it's a brilliant league. There's so much to admire about the actual football, but all the stuff around it, the kind of stuff he talks about here, kind of stinks a little bit. And yeah, it's quite sad to read about. This is kind of the brochure really. And it kind of didn't follow through on that.
Yeah, I think over the years there's scope for it to be still brilliant and entertaining and stuff, but not quite as greedy. I mean, that quote there, yes, we want to make more money so we can pump it back into the game. That doesn't happen. Exactly. It's a pittance that goes back into it. And it's like, you think, with the amount of money that's there, the good that could do lower down in the game. But
yeah, absolutely.
Without affecting the top part that much.
Yeah, it's the same as so much of society, I guess. But I completely agree. But yeah, I wonder how they felt at the time. Did they genuinely? I don't know. Was it a conscious land grab? Was it an unconscious? I really don't know. But you read this and you just think, yeah, pretty much none of this has been followed through on. And I'd love to wave that quote, there's no way we'll ask him to play on Monday and Wednesday, see what kind of Guardiola, Klopp or whoever would say about that with all the stuff that's gone on in the last couple of years. But even before then, it was kind of happening. There were 4 games in a week for certain teams and stuff. So, yeah.
All right, so we're closing the magazine then, and the back page is a colour picture from UEFA 92 of Jocelyn Angloma of France and Anders Limpar of Sweden. Jocelyn for the ball.
Jocelyn for the ball. Well done, Tom. Was that deliberate?
No. Both in the classic Adidas kits of the time with the stripes at the corner. The Sweden shorts look.
Yeah, I'd forgotten about that again. I really like those actually. That they had this stripe effect on the shorts. Particularly when on the shirt on the other side, so it's kind of like almost like an invisible stripe across the rest of the body. I like that.
It just looking at it screams out to me Anders Limpar's shin guard there. It just looks.
Oh my God! Yeah.
If it is even that, I mean, it's thin, very thin. It almost looks as though it may just be tape that's on his shin. So, but then again, there's tape around the bottom to hold it up. That looks remarkable. It just shows you how thin those socks are as well, I guess.
That's extraordinary. I hadn't noticed that. So it's barely more than an ice lolly stick, isn't it? It's just amazing though. It's barely, obviously it's covering the shin bone, but there's like no protection to the side.
Yeah. Great strip, so yep.
All right, so back to you, Andy.
Okay. Thanks, Rob, for sitting through this with us. What's happening with yourself at the moment? What you working on?
Just the usual stuff really. Yeah, I've nothing much to say really. Just usual kind of day-to-day stuff. I'm eventually one of these days going to write a book about the Arsenal Man United rivalry, the kind of Wenger Ferguson era, but also going back a bit before that. So the genesis of it from kind of 1983. But yeah, mainly just day-to-day stuff.
Well, so I've read something about that recently, but I've read it on your Substack.
Yeah. We just started with a couple of mates, mainly just to try and kind of push us to do a few more historical bits that we enjoy. That I've always quite enjoyed writing kind of longer stuff, just a bit richer in detail, probably a bit more indulgent, but I quite like looking at kind of long form stories of, I don't know whether it's that or Denmark in the 80s or Sampdoria in 1991, whatever. Yeah, I always enjoy stuff like that.
Yeah.
So the books that you've done, where's the best place for people to find them?
Probably, as someone said, I think on your pod, the worst place in the world, Amazon probably. But yeah, just anywhere really. Waterstones or whatever, or Abe Books is always good. Yeah. You can find it online.
I was reading an article, it was an interview with you, and it's suggested that, I mean, I'm not a big cricket fan or anything like that, but it's you are a big cricket fan. Would you say you're a bigger cricket fan than you are a football fan still?
I would say probably more now, but not kind of historically. I think when I was growing up, it was kind of maybe like 60-40, 70-30. I think just because so much of modern football's fairly abhorrent, not the actual football itself that much. Cricket's kind of still a little bit more, pure is not the right word, but you know what I mean. So I probably follow modern cricket more keenly than modern football, I would say.
No, that when I read about your thoughts behind that, that struck a chord with me. It was like the sort of comments that you get on a football thread is a lot more vitriolic and just depressing.
But then you lose yourself in the actual game. I always remember just before Christmas, I was doing a live blog on Spurs Liverpool, the game that ended, I think, 2-2. And at half time, I just thought, there's so much I dislike about modern football. Then you watch a half like that, you lose yourself in it, and you're 12 years old again. Mm-hmm. It's just always got that power. Which is why I guess it's so great. But yeah, I do think that the kind of discourse is a lot. It's not perfect for cricket at all. I think it's kind of getting a bit worse, actually, a bit more. England are not very good at the moment, and so they're getting a bit more entitled and everything else. But yeah, you get kind of less. And it's not just abuse. It's not even just abuse. It's just probably that kind of entitled. Just that it's just really incessant entitled. We should be brilliant all the time. I always feel like if you take 20 teams in England, if you ask the fans of each club where they should be, where they should actually be, where they should perform. No one's getting relegated. 5 teams winning the league every year. And I know it was always like that to an extent, but I think it's becoming less realistic and there's less kind of empathy towards the challenge of modern sport, I guess. And I don't know, I just find it a bit boring sometimes. But the actual sport itself, particularly the kind of highest level, is still so good. Yeah. In fact, it's not even just the highest level. It's just sometimes you can watch a match where the kind of mood catches or whatever. And it's still so great.
And answer a question from do you do social media? Are you on Twitter? Because I have followed a few links that said 100 Ashes quotes, is it? And,
no, that was for a book ages ago, yeah. So there's one at the moment for the Substack, but it's more like a general thing. It's Net72, so it's NTZR72, which is designed so that people will forget it and they won't be able to find us, and we can just kind of occasionally put a few links up and But I kind of have a on-off relationship with Twitter. I kind of regret it when I'm on it, regret it when I'm not, and kind of worry about whether I should be. But at the moment, I don't have like a personal account. No.
Yeah. Okay, great stuff.
People can subscribe to your Substack.
Oh yeah, it's the same. It's what is it? It's net.ntzr.substack.com. So mainly at the moment it's just historical stuff, but I think we're going to try eventually, if we can ever get in the same room, try and kind of plan and do a few current bits as well. Maybe cricket more than football, I don't know, but we'll see.
Okay, I'm going to throw it out. I've just said that idea, Tom, for a future show, and if you're up for it, Rob, I think it would be good if we do a future breakdown of A Shot at Glory.
I'd love to. I'd absolutely love to. Yeah.
Okay, let's do that.
What's it called these days? A watch party?
Yeah.
I've never done a watch party, but I'd be happy to try. Yeah.
Right, okay, let's sort that out. Listen, thank you again for taking the time, and we hope you enjoyed the magazine that we chose for you. So thank you.
Yeah, it was great fun. Thank you.
Okay, thanks to everyone for listening. As always, follow us on shoottb_podcast. Tell your friends about us. Listen to the shows that have gone on before. And thank you to Tom, as always, for being Tom.
Thank you, Andy.
And until the next time, let's shoot the breeze.